Hello everyone and welcome. This is Black Magic speaking. We have handpicked a wonderful story for today. What if Harry found Salazar Slytherin's hidden library at age 8 and learned magic no wizard has known for 1000 years? New videos drop regularly, so subscribe and hit the bell to stay updated. And don't forget to like if you enjoy the story. Shall we begin? Here goes. Chapter 1. The chamber beneath. Harry Potter ran faster than he'd ever run before. His breath came in sharp gasps, his two large trainers slapping against the wet pavement as he sprinted across the schoolyard. Behind him, Dudley's gang hooped and hollered, the thrill of the chase energizing them despite the drizzling rain. "We're gonna get you, freak!" Dudley bellowed, his voice closer than Harry expected. 8-year-old Harry darted around the corner of the school building, searching desperately for somewhere to hide. St. Gregory's primary school wasn't large, and he'd exhausted most of his usual hiding spots. Dudley had gotten smarter about the chase, or at least, his friends had. A stitch burned in Harry's side as he slipped on a patch of mud, nearly falling before regaining his balance. The maintenance shed loomed ahead, locked, as always. The dumpsters would just trap him. In desperation, Harry veered toward a narrow gap between two buildings, a cramped alley that served as a drainage path. He went that way. Piers Polkiss shouted, pointing. Harry squeezed through the gap, ignoring the way the rough brick scraped his arms. The space narrowed as he pushed deeper, forcing him to turn sideways. His glasses fogged with the heat of his breath against the cool air. Behind him, he heard Dudley trying to squeeze his bulky frame into the passage. "Too tight," Dudley complained. "Malcolm, you're skinnier, get in there." Harry kept moving, heart pounding. The passage shouldn't be this long, it was just between two classroom buildings. But as the light dimmed and the walls pressed closer, he realized he'd never been this far in before. His foot caught on something, a broken chunk of concrete, and he stumbled forward, arms flailing. Instead of hitting a wall or fence, Harry tumbled down what felt like 3 or 4 steps, landing hard on his knees on a cold stone floor. "Ow," he hissed, then froze, listening. The voices of Dudley's gang sounded distant now, muffled. Harry pushed his glasses up his nose and squinted into the darkness. He couldn't see much, but he was definitely in some sort of underground space. Cool, damp air brushed against his face, carrying an earthy smell like old books and stone. "Hello?" Harry whispered, his voice echoing slightly. No answer. A sudden flash of inspiration hit him. Harry fumbled in his pocket and pulled out the small flashlight he'd rescued from Dudley's broken toys. It flickered weakly, the batteries were nearly dead, but provided just enough light to see a few feet ahead. What he saw made him gasp. He wasn't in some maintenance tunnel or drainage pipe. He stood at the edge of what looked like an ancient stone chamber. Rough-hewn walls arched overhead, decorated with strange symbols that seemed to shimmer in the faint light. Ahead, a narrow passageway led deeper underground. "What is this place?" Harry whispered, his voice small in the vastness. Curiosity overcame fear. He'd never found anywhere like this before, somewhere Dudley couldn't follow. Somewhere that could be just his. With a final glance back at the entrance, Harry moved forward, following the passage. The floor sloped gently downward, the ceiling dropping until Harry had to duck his head slightly. The walls were covered in more symbols, some looked like writing, others like pictures of snakes and other creatures. Harry ran his fingers along one particularly intricate carving of a serpent. To his shock, the carved snake moved under his touch, stone scales rippling as if alive. Harry yanked his hand back with a yelp. The snake froze, once again just a carving in stone. "I imagined it," he told himself firmly, though he wasn't convinced. Strange things happened around Harry. Windows repaired themselves after Dudley blamed him for breaking them. His hair grew back overnight after Aunt Petunia's disastrous haircut, and once he'd somehow ended up on the school roof when Dudley's gang had cornered him. The Dursleys called him a freak because of these incidents. Maybe they were right. Maybe this strange place had called to him because he was strange too. The passage widened suddenly, opening into a circular chamber at least 3 times the size of his classroom. Harry's dying flashlight barely illuminated a fraction of it, but what he could see left him speechless. Books. Hundreds, no, thousands of books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Ancient-looking tomes with leather bindings, scrolls tied with faded ribbon, stacks of what looked like metal plates engraved with more of the strange symbols. Stone benches circled the room, and in the center stood a pedestal with a massive open book. Harry approached the central pedestal cautiously. The book looked ancient, its pages yellowed but somehow pristine. Unlike the dusty appearance of everything else, this book seemed to glow with a faint, greenish light. The pages were covered with more of the strange symbols, curves and lines that somehow reminded Harry of snakes. As he stared at the symbols, something bizarre happened. The curves began to shift before his eyes, rearranging themselves into words he could understand: approach, speaker, and claim the knowledge of Salazar Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four. Harry blinked and rubbed his eyes. The words remained. "I can read this," he whispered in disbelief. "But how?" His flashlight chose that moment to flicker and die, plunging the chamber into darkness. Harry stood frozen, panic rising in his throat. Then, as his eyes adjusted, he realized the chamber wasn't completely dark. The symbols on the walls gave off a faint, phosphorescent glow, enough to see by. Harry returned his attention to the book. More words had appeared: "Speak the tongue of serpents and the light will come." The tongue of serpents? Harry repeated, confused. What does that mean? As he spoke, he noticed something odd. When he said serpents, it didn't sound like English. Instead, a strange hissing sound escaped his lips, a sound he'd never made before but which felt somehow natural. Immediately, flames burst to life in brackets around the circular room, casting warm golden light throughout the chamber. Harry gasped and spun around, taking in the full magnificence of the place for the first time. The walls stretched at least 20 feet high, every inch covered with books or scrolls. Interspersed among the shelving were lifelike statues of snakes, their emerald eyes glittering in the firelight. A plush green carpet covered the stone floor, worn in paths between the central pedestal and various sections of the library. "This is impossible," Harry breathed, turning in a slow circle. Not impossible for a true heir of the serpent tongue. The words appeared not in the book this time, but in Harry's mind. He whipped around, searching for the source. Near one of the brackets, a shadow moved. Harry squinted, trying to make out what it was. A tall figure stepped into the light, sort of. Harry could see through it, like it was made of smoke or fog. It had the shape of a man with a long beard, wearing robes unlike any Harry had seen before. The figure's eyes fixed on Harry with an intensity that made him step back. "After 1,000 years, a speaker returns to my sanctuary," the figure said, though its lips didn't move. The words simply appeared in Harry's mind. "Young, very young. But the gift is unmistakable." What are you?" Harry asked, his voice shaking slightly. "I am what remains of Salazar Slytherin, preserved through arts now forgotten to wizard kind." "And you, young speaker, what is your name?" "Harry Potter," he answered automatically. "Did you say wizard kind? Are you, a wizard?" The figure's expression shifted to something like amusement. "I was one of the greatest wizards of my age, young Harry. And you too carry the gift of magic. Did you not know?" Harry's mind reeled. Magic. It explained so much: the strange incidents, the feelings he sometimes had, the way Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon looked at him with fear beneath their contempt. "I'm a wizard," Harry whispered. "Indeed. And a Parselmouth, a speaker of the serpent tongue, which is why you can understand me. Few wizards possess this gift." The figure drifted closer to Harry. "Tell me, how did you find my sanctuary?" "I was running from my cousin," Harry explained. "I just fell in. Interesting. The entrance should only reveal itself to those with the gift. The figure, the Echo of Slytherin, studied Harry closely. You must have powerful magic indeed, to activate the entrance so young. Harry glanced around the vast library again. What is this place exactly? My personal collection. Knowledge too valuable to share with those unworthy, preserved for one who might understand its worth. Slytherin's Echo gestured to the thousands of books. Every magical discipline is represented here, spells forgotten by modern wizards, potions of remarkable power, the secrets of magical creatures long extinct. And I can learn from these? Harry asked, excitement building despite his lingering fear. If you wish it. The knowledge is yours to claim, as one gifted with the serpent tongue. Harry approached one of the shelves, his fingers hovering over the spine of a small, green-bound book. I can just take these. The books cannot leave the sanctuary, Slytherin's Echo replied. But you may return as often as you wish to study. Perhaps in time, you will prove worthy of more. Harry carefully pulled the green book from the shelf. Like the central tome, its text rearranged itself into readable English as he opened it. The title page read, Elementary Magical Theory for Young Practitioners. This is brilliant, Harry breathed, flipping through pages that explained concepts like magical energy, focus, and something called wandless manipulation. You seem eager to learn, Slytherin observed. A promising quality. Can I learn to control my magic? Harry asked, thinking of all the times strange things had happened when he was angry or scared. To use it when I want to, not just when weird things happen. That is where all magical education begins, Slytherin confirmed. With control. Harry sat cross-legged on the plush carpet, the book open in his lap. Then that's where I'll start. Hours later, Harry emerged from the passage back into the schoolyard, blinking against the late afternoon sunlight. School had ended long ago. Aunt Petunia would be furious that he hadn't come straight home. But Harry couldn't bring himself to care. His mind buzzed with everything he'd learned. Magic was real. He was a wizard. And he had found a place filled with magical knowledge that apparently only he could access. For the first time in his life, Harry felt something like hope. The Dursleys were predictably angry when he finally reached number 4, Privet Drive. Where have you been, boy? Uncle Vernon demanded, his face an alarming shade of purple. Your aunt had dinner delayed because of you. Sorry, Harry mumbled, not meeting his uncle's eyes. I was at the school library. Lost track of time. The lie came easily. Harry had never been much of a liar before, but something told him the secret library had to remain just that, a secret. Library? Uncle Vernon scoffed. Since when do you care about books? Leave him alone, Vernon, Aunt Petunia said unexpectedly. If the boy wants to waste time in the library instead of causing trouble, I don't see the problem. Harry kept his face neutral, but inside he was shocked. Aunt Petunia never defended him. She shot him a suspicious look, but waved him toward the kitchen. Wash up and eat quickly. Then straight to your cupboard. Yes, Aunt Petunia. As Harry ate the cold leftovers, his mind returned to what he'd read about controlling magic. The book had described a simple exercise, visualizing energy flowing through your body and concentrating it in your fingertips. Harry had tried it in the sanctuary but hadn't managed to produce any visible effect. Later, lying in his cupboard under the stairs, Harry tried again. He closed his eyes, picturing a warm, bright energy flowing from his chest, down his arm, pooling in his right hand. For several minutes, nothing happened except that his hand felt unusually warm. Then suddenly, his fingertips began to tingle. Harry's eyes flew open, and he gasped. A faint, greenish light glowed at his fingertips, just bright enough to illuminate the cramped space. Bloody hell, he whispered, then quickly extinguished the light when he heard Uncle Vernon's heavy footsteps in the hallway. Harry lay back on his thin mattress, heart racing with excitement. He had done magic, on purpose. A small thing, just a light, but it was proof. Proof that what Slytherin had told him was true. Proof that he wasn't a freak, he was special. For the first time in years, Harry fell asleep with a smile on his face. The next few weeks established a pattern. Harry would go to school, endure classes, avoid Dudley when possible, and then slip away to the secret sanctuary whenever he could find an opportunity. After school, on weekends when the Dursleys thought he was at the public library, during lunch breaks, any chance he got, Harry would descend into Slytherin's library and absorb as much knowledge as he could. The echo of Slytherin wasn't always present. It seemed to manifest more strongly when Harry was reading certain books or practicing certain types of magic. When it did appear, it would offer guidance, corrections, and occasionally praise when Harry mastered a particularly difficult concept. Harry learned quickly that modern wizards primarily channeled their magic through wands, which explained why his accidental magic had been just that, accidental. Without a wand, controlling magic was much harder, requiring intense concentration and a deep understanding of magical theory. But the sanctuary contained texts on wandless magic, apparently a skill most adult wizards struggled with, but which had been more common in Slytherin's day. Harry threw himself into these studies with determination. If he could master magic without a wand, he wouldn't need to wait until he could somehow obtain one. Focus your intent, not just your energy, Slytherin instructed one afternoon as Harry struggled to levitate a small stone. Magic responds to will as much as power. Harry stared at the stone, picturing it rising into the air, wanting it to rise with every fiber of his being. His fingertips tingled with the now familiar sensation of magic gathering there. Up, he whispered, pushing the magic outward. The stone wobbled, then slowly rose 2 inches off the table before dropping back down. I did it! Harry exclaimed, grinning widely. A beginning, Slytherin acknowledged. With practice, such minor feats will become effortless. Is there a way to do magic without speaking? Harry asked, already thinking about how useful that would be around the Dursleys. Nonverbal magic is typically an advanced skill, Slytherin replied. Yet for the most basic manipulations, a strong enough will can suffice. Harry tried again, this time focusing silently on lifting the stone. It took 3 attempts, but eventually the stone rose a full 6 inches and hovered there for nearly 10 seconds before Harry's concentration broke. Impressive, Slytherin commented, a note of genuine surprise in his mental voice. You have a natural affinity for the magical arts. Or a good teacher, Harry replied with a smile. The echo seemed pleased by this response. Both, perhaps. Now, shall we move on to something more practical? I believe you mentioned difficulties with your relatives. Harry's smile faded. They hate magic. They call me a freak when strange things happen. Muggles often fear what they cannot understand, Slytherin said dismissively. But there are ways to ensure they treat you with more respect. I don't want to hurt them, Harry said quickly, thinking of the darker books he'd glimpsed on the higher shelves. Nor should you. Magic used in anger leads to consequences even the most skilled wizard may regret. The echo drifted toward a different section of the library. But subtle influences require no harm. Come, let us explore the art of minor compulsions and aversions. The book Slytherin directed Harry to contain simple spells designed to influence behavior without controlling minds. Harry learned to create an aversion field, a subtle magical effect that made people want to avoid a specific area. This could keep Dudley out of my cupboard, Harry realized. Indeed. And with practice, you might extend it to yourself, making your cousin disinclined to pursue you. Over the next few days, Harry practiced creating these subtle effects. The first success came when he placed an aversion on the door to his cupboard. Uncle Vernon reached for the handle to yank it open one morning, then suddenly frowned and muttered something about checking it later, before walking away. Dudley, who had been planning to root through Harry's few possessions while he did yard work, suddenly remembered a television program he wanted to watch. Even Aunt Petunia, who normally inspected Harry's cupboard weekly for contraband, found herself consistently forgetting to do so. Harry was careful not to overuse these abilities. Minor applications wouldn't alert the adult wizarding world to his activities, Slytherin assured him, but major manipulations might draw attention. Is there a wizard government? Harry asked one day, after reading a reference to magical law. The Ministry of Magic oversees the British wizarding community, Slytherin explained. They monitor magical activity, particularly around Muggles, and enforce the Statute of Secrecy, a law preventing wizards from revealing magic to the non-magical world. Would they know what I'm doing here? Unlikely. My sanctuary is heavily warded against detection, and wandless magic performed by young wizards is often dismissed as accidental magic, which the Ministry expects from magical children. This reassured Harry, who continued to expand his magical education. He moved from theory to practical applications, learning to manipulate small objects, create lights of varying colors and intensities, and even generate minor sensory illusions. The more he learned, the more questions he had. Why hadn't anyone told him he was a wizard? Were his parents wizards too? Where did wizards learn magic formally? There is a school, Hogwarts, where young witches and wizards are educated, Slytherin told him. I helped found it, 1,000 years ago. You will likely receive an invitation when you turn 11. 3 more years, Harry said, feeling both excitement and impatience. Will there be others like me there? Other, what did you call it? Parselmouths. The gift is rare, Slytherin replied. Traditionally associated with my bloodline, though occasionally it appears elsewhere. At Hogwarts, students are divided into 4 houses, each named for one of the founders. Those with ambition and cunning often find themselves in Slytherin House. That sounds like where I'd belong, Harry said thoughtfully. I have to be cunning around the Dursleys, and I'm definitely ambitious about learning magic. The Echo seemed pleased by this response, though Harry noticed it didn't directly agree or disagree. Summer arrived, bringing both opportunities and challenges. Without school, Harry had more free time, but the Dursleys expected him to fill it with chores. Still, he managed to slip away to the sanctuary most days, using the public library as his cover story. By late June, Harry had made significant progress. He could levitate objects the size of books, create illusions that would last several minutes, and had even mastered a minor healing spell that mended small cuts and bruises, useful given Dudley's continued attempts to use him as a punching bag. One sweltering July afternoon, Harry was practicing a more complex spell, attempting to transform a small stone into a marble, when Slytherin's Echo appeared more vividly than usual. Your progress exceeds expectations, it said without preamble. Perhaps it is time to introduce you to more significant magic. Like what? Harry asked eagerly. Protective enchantments. Wards against detection. And perhaps, the Echo paused, the beginning arts of mental shielding. Mental shielding? Harry repeated, intrigued. Occlumency, the protection of one's mind against external penetration. Among the most useful skills a wizard can possess. People can read minds? Harry asked, alarmed. Some wizards practice legilimency, the art of navigating another's thoughts. Not common, but not exceedingly rare either, particularly among the powerful. This revelation disturbed Harry. The idea that someone could look into his mind, discover his secrets, like the sanctuary, was terrifying. Teach me, he said firmly. The mental discipline required for occlumency proved challenging. Harry struggled to clear his mind, to organize his thoughts as the ancient texts instructed. But the fear of having his mind invaded drove him to practice relentlessly. By his 9th birthday, which the Dursleys ignored as usual, Harry had managed to construct rudimentary mental barriers. Nothing that would stop a determined adult wizard, Slytherin told him, but enough to alert him to an intrusion and perhaps shield his most important secrets. Meanwhile, Harry's life at Privet Drive had improved marginally. The subtle aversion spells kept the Dursleys from bothering him too much. A mild compulsion on his school records had convinced his teachers he was receiving adequate care at home, stopping their occasional concerned questions. Most importantly, Harry had learned to make himself less noticeable when he wanted to avoid attention, not quite invisibility, but a subtle magic that directed attention elsewhere. This proved invaluable for slipping away to the sanctuary or avoiding Dudley's gang. Yet despite these improvements, Harry felt increasingly isolated. His growing magical abilities created a wider gulf between himself and the Muggle world. His only companion was the Echo of Slytherin, an ancient, not entirely trustworthy guide whose agenda remained mysterious. "Are there other young wizards nearby?" Harry asked one day. "Other magical children I could talk to?" "Perhaps," Slytherin replied vaguely. "But revealing yourself prematurely would be unwise. The wizarding world has expectations of young Harry Potter." "What do you mean?" Harry asked, startled. "Why would anyone have expectations of me?" The Echo was silent for a long moment. "I have learned much from your mind during our sessions, young Harry. Fragments of your past that you yourself do not remember. It seems you may be somewhat known in the wizarding world." "Known? Me? Why?" "That is a conversation for another day," Slytherin replied. "For now, focus on your studies. Knowledge is power, and power provides options. When you enter the wizarding world properly, you will need every advantage." Harry wanted to press for more information, but experience had taught him that Slytherin would reveal things in his own time. Instead, he turned back to the text on defensive magic he'd been studying. If he really was known in the wizarding world, he wanted to be prepared. No one would take advantage of him or control him, not the Dursleys, not the Ministry of Magic, not whoever had left him with his magic-hating relatives. Harry Potter would enter the wizarding world on his own terms, armed with knowledge no one would expect him to possess. Autumn came, bringing cooler weather and a return to school. Harry started his final year at St. Gregory's, counting down the days until his Hogwarts letter would arrive, though that was still nearly 2 years away. His command of wandless magic had improved dramatically. Harry could now perform dozens of useful spells, from creating light to mending broken objects, from warming his cupboard on cold nights to cooling himself during Aunt Petunia's garden work assignments. The library seemed to adapt to his growing abilities, revealing new sections and books as his skills advanced. Slytherin's Echo became more forthcoming with information about the wizarding world, describing places like Diagon Alley, the magical shopping district in London, and institutions like Gringotts, the wizard bank run by goblins. Harry absorbed it all eagerly, creating a mental map of a world he'd soon join. But a persistent question nagged at him: why had he been left with the Dursleys? If he was somehow known in the wizarding world, as Slytherin had hinted, why had he been abandoned in the Muggle one? One October evening, as rain lashed against the windows of number 4, Privet Drive, Harry decided to press the issue. "You said I'm known in the wizarding world," he said as soon as he entered the sanctuary. "I need to know why." The Echo materialized slowly, as if reluctant to have this conversation. "Very well. It is perhaps time you understood your place in our world's recent history." What followed was a tale so fantastical that Harry would have dismissed it as fiction had it come from anyone else. A dark wizard called Voldemort. His reign of terror. Harry's parents, James and Lily Potter, both powerful wizards themselves, murdered on Halloween night when Harry was just a baby. And somehow, impossibly, the killing curse that should have taken Harry's life had rebounded upon Voldemort instead, vanquishing him and leaving Harry with nothing but a lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. "The boy who lived," Slytherin's Echo concluded. "That is what they call you. The only person ever to survive the killing curse." Harry sat in stunned silence, his fingers unconsciously tracing the scar he'd had for as long as he could remember. "So my parents didn't die in a car crash," he finally said, anger building inside him. "The Dursleys lied about everything. Did you expect truth from Muggles?" Slytherin asked dismissively. "They fear what they cannot understand. Better to invent a mundane explanation than acknowledge the power that flows in your veins." "And Voldemort? Is he really gone?" Harry asked, already suspecting the answer. One who delves as deeply into the dark arts as the self-styled Lord Voldemort would have taken precautions against true death, Slytherin replied carefully. I cannot know for certain, but I suspect he exists in some diminished form, waiting to return. Harry's mind raced with the implications. If Voldemort returned, he would certainly target Harry again. The boy who lived would be at the top of his list. I need to be ready, Harry said, a new determination hardening his voice. Not just basic spells and theory. I need to learn how to defend myself. How to fight. A wise decision, Slytherin agreed, an undercurrent of satisfaction in his mental voice. There are texts here on defensive magic far beyond what is taught at Hogwarts. With your natural abilities, you could master spells most adult wizards would struggle to perform. Over the following weeks, Harry's education took a more focused turn. While still practicing general magic, he devoted more time to defensive and combative spells. He learned to create shields against magical attacks, to send out blasts of force, to enchant objects to serve as temporary defenders. Without a wand, many of the more powerful spells remained beyond his reach, but Harry discovered that his Parseltongue ability gave him unique advantages with certain types of magic, particularly those invented or modified by Slytherin himself. Serpensortia, Harry hissed one afternoon, focusing his magic as the ancient text described. A small green snake materialized on the floor before him, raising its head curiously. Hello, Harry said in Parseltongue. Can you understand me? A speaker, the snake responded, sounding surprised. I understand. I obey. Harry spent the next hour exploring the limits of the conjured serpent's abilities. It could follow simple commands, relay what it saw and heard, even deliver small objects. When Harry finally dismissed it with another hissed command, he was already thinking of the practical applications. I could send a snake to explore places I can't go, he told Slytherin's echo. Or to keep watch for me. Indeed. The serpent conjuration was one of my most useful creations. Few recognize its full potential, seeing it merely as a distraction in dueling. Harry's magical education continued to accelerate. By the time winter holidays arrived, he could perform magic that would have impressed even adult wizards, though always carefully, always in secret. The sanctuary remained his refuge and classroom, the echo of Slytherin his only mentor. Yet as his powers grew, Harry began to notice subtle shifts in the echo's guidance. Slytherin increasingly directed him toward books on more questionable magic, not dark arts exactly, but spells that operated in gray areas. Magic designed to control, to manipulate, to gain advantage through means some might consider unethical. Harry approached these cautiously, learning the theory but often declining to practice the more dubious spells. This seemed to disappoint the Echo, though it never directly criticized his choices. I want to be powerful, not feared, Harry explained after declining to learn a particularly nasty hex. There's a difference between being prepared to defend myself and looking for ways to hurt others. A noble sentiment, Slytherin responded, though Harry detected a note of condescension. Yet in the wizarding world, as in any other, power often demands difficult choices. The line between defensive and offensive magic is rarely clear. These philosophical disagreements became more frequent as Harry's 9th year gave way to his 10th. The Echo seemed increasingly intent on pushing him toward a specific path, one that emphasized power over principle, cunning over compassion. Harry pushed back when he felt Slytherin crossed a line, but he couldn't deny the value of much of what he was learning. The ability to detect lies, to shield his thoughts, to recognize magical traps, these were skills that would serve him well regardless of how he chose to use his magic. Spring arrived, bringing with it Harry's first venture into London on his own. Using money saved from odd jobs and a bit of magical persuasion to confuse the ticket inspector, he made his way to Charing Cross Road, where Slytherin had told him the entrance to Diagon Alley could be found. Look for the Leaky Cauldron, the Echo had instructed. A shabby pub between a bookshop and a record store. Muggles cannot see it, but your eyes will recognize it for what it is. Harry stood on the busy London street, heart pounding with excitement and nervousness. For a moment, he saw nothing unusual, just the normal shops of a London thoroughfare. Then his eyes seemed to refocus, sliding between a large bookshop and a music store to land on a small, grimy-looking pub with a wooden sign, the Leaky Cauldron. "I found it," Harry whispered to himself, a grin spreading across his face. He hesitated before entering. Slytherin had warned him that his identity might be recognized. The lightning scar was famous in the wizarding world, and Harry's resemblance to his father was apparently striking. A quick glamour should suffice, the echo had told him, teaching Harry a simple spell to make his features appear slightly different and his scar less noticeable. The magic wouldn't fool any adult wizard looking closely, but for a casual visit, it should prevent immediate recognition. Harry cast the spell, feeling the strange sensation of his features shifting slightly. His hair darkened a shade and lay flatter, his eyes shifted from bright green to a more muted hazel, and his scar faded to a barely visible line. Taking a deep breath, Harry pushed open the door to the Leaky Cauldron and stepped into the wizarding world for the first time. The pub was dimly lit and rather shabby, with wooden tables scattered around a large room. A few patrons sat drinking from strange-looking mugs and glasses, engaged in quiet conversation. Behind the bar, an older bald man was wiping glasses with a cloth. Harry kept his head down, moving purposefully toward the back where Slytherin had told him the entrance to Diagon Alley could be found. Nobody paid him much attention, just another young wizard, perhaps shopping with parents who would follow soon. The back of the pub opened onto a small courtyard with nothing but a trash bin and a brick wall. Harry approached the wall, remembering Slytherin's instructions: 3 up, 2 across from the trash bin, tap 3 times with magical intent. Harry didn't have a wand, but he'd been practicing wandless magic for nearly 2 years now. He focused his magic into his index finger, tapped the specified brick 3 times, and willed the entrance to open. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then the brick wriggled, a small hole appeared, and the entire wall rearranged itself into an archway large enough to walk through. Beyond lay a sight that took Harry's breath away, a winding cobblestone street lined with the most extraordinary shops he could imagine. Cauldrons stacked outside one store, a window full of owls next to it, robes displayed in another, strange astronomical instruments in yet another. And people, witches and wizards in robes of every color, pointed hats, carrying packages and wands, talking animatedly as they went about their shopping. Children pressed their noses against windows displaying racing brooms, teenagers laughed in groups outside what looked like an ice cream parlor. This was his world. The world he belonged in. Harry stepped through the archway, feeling like he'd finally come home. Without money, he couldn't purchase anything, but that wasn't his purpose today. Harry wanted to observe, to learn, to begin understanding the culture he would soon join officially. He wandered the alley, absorbing everything, the names of shops, the items for sale, the conversations around him. Gringotts dominated the far end of the alley, an imposing white building guarded by creatures Harry recognized from descriptions as goblins. Nearby stood Ollivander's, the wand-maker's shop where he would eventually purchase his wand. Flourish and Blots displayed books in its windows that made Harry's fingers itch to browse their pages. As fascinating as these prominent establishments were, Harry found himself drawn to the smaller, less crowded shops on the alley's side streets. Following his intuition, he turned down a narrower path called Viridian Lane, where the shops looked older, more specialized. Halfway down this lane, a small storefront caught his eye. Unlike the colorful displays of the main alley, this shop featured a simple wooden sign reading, Nightshade's rare volumes, and a single dusty window displaying ancient-looking tomes. Something about the shop called to Harry. Perhaps it was the similarity to the Sanctuary's collection, or maybe just his hunger for magical knowledge. Either way, he found himself pushing open the door, a small bell announcing his entrance. The interior was dim and smelled of old parchment and leather. Bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, with rolling ladders providing access to the highest volumes. In the center of the shop, a counter held an open ledger and a few displayed items under glass. "Can I help you, young man?" came a voice from between the stacks. A woman emerged, perhaps in her 40s with silver streaks in her dark hair. She wore simple dark blue robes and silver spectacles that glinted in the shop's lamplight. Her expression was curious but not unwelcoming. "I'm just looking," Harry said, suddenly conscious of his youth and lack of funds. The woman studied him for a moment, her head tilting slightly. "Browsing is always welcome. I'm Elara Nightshade, the proprietor." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you here alone?" Harry hesitated, uncertain how to respond. Adults in the Muggle world would find a 10-year-old wandering London by himself concerning. Did Wizarding Society have different expectations? "My aunt is shopping for potion supplies," he improvised. "I'm more interested in books, so she said I could look around while she finishes." Ms. Nightshade didn't seem entirely convinced, but she nodded. "Well then, feel free to explore. If you have questions about any particular subject, I'm happy to direct you." "Thank you," Harry said, relieved. He began scanning the nearest shelves, quickly realizing this was no ordinary bookshop. The titles covered obscure magical disciplines, historical periods rarely discussed in the texts he'd found in Slytherin's sanctuary, and theoretical approaches to magic that seemed quite advanced. "You have an interesting collection," Harry commented, genuinely impressed. "I specialize in volumes you won't find at Flourish and Blotts," Ms. Nightshade replied with a small smile. "Academic works, historical texts, theoretical magic, for the discerning reader." Harry's eyes landed on a slim volume bound in blue leather, Wandless Manipulations, a Practical Approach. He carefully pulled it from the shelf, his heart racing. This was exactly the sort of book he'd been looking for, something that might help him refine his wandless abilities. "An unusual interest for someone your age," Ms. Nightshade observed, watching him examine the book. Harry looked up, thinking quickly. "My family travels a lot. Sometimes I can't always use conventional magic. I thought it might be useful to learn alternatives." "Indeed," she said, her expression unreadable. "That particular volume is 7 galleons." Harry reluctantly placed the book back on the shelf. "I'll have to come back another time. I didn't bring money today." Ms. Nightshade studied him for another long moment. "Perhaps we could make an arrangement. I occasionally need assistance organizing my inventory. If you're interested in that book, you could work in the shop to earn it." Harry stared at her in surprise. "Really? You'd let me do that?" "You seem to have a genuine interest in magical knowledge," she said. "That's becoming uncomfortably rare among the younger generation. Besides, I could use the help." She paused, her eyes narrowing again. "Assuming, of course, your family permits it." This was an unexpected complication. Harry couldn't exactly bring Aunt Petunia to a magical bookshop to give permission. "I'll have to ask," he said, buying time to think. "When would I need to start?" "No rush. Come back when you can." She picked up the Wandless Magic book and placed it behind the counter. "I'll hold this for you in the meantime." Harry thanked her and, after a bit more browsing, made his excuses to leave. As he walked back through Diagon Alley toward the Leaky Cauldron, his mind raced with possibilities. Working in a magical bookshop would be incredible, a chance to learn more about the wizarding world, to access books he couldn't find in Slytherin's sanctuary, to interact with actual witches and wizards. But how could he manage it without revealing his situation? The answer came to him as he boarded the train back to Surrey. Another subtle compulsion, the kind he'd used to convince his teachers that all was well at home. If he could make the Dursleys believe he had a legitimate job in London, they wouldn't question his absences, especially if it meant he was out of their hair. And Ms. Nightshade, she seemed perceptive, but also discreet. Perhaps she wouldn't ask too many questions if he proved himself useful. By the time Harry returned to Privet Drive, he had a plan forming. He would return to Nightshade's shop next weekend with a carefully crafted story and a subtle magical nudge to make it believable. The Echo of Slytherin was less enthusiastic when Harry explained his encounter. "This bookseller, she noticed something unusual about you," it observed. Caution would be advisable. But think about what I could learn, Harry countered. Your library is amazing, but it's 1,000 years old. There must be newer magical developments worth knowing about. Perhaps, the Echo conceded reluctantly. Yet exposure increases risk. The wizarding world believes Harry Potter is safely hidden away, protected until he's ready to attend Hogwarts. I'll be careful, Harry promised. The glamour worked well enough today. And I need to start understanding how the magical world actually works now, not just how it was in your time. The Echo remained skeptical, but didn't forbid the plan outright. Harry spent the week practicing more subtle glamour charms and refining the compulsion he would use on the Dursleys. The following Saturday, Harry enacted his plan. A carefully worded suggestion convinced Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia that Harry had been offered a part-time position helping an elderly bookseller organize inventory. The job would keep him out of their hair on weekends and might even bring in a small amount of money, which Vernon promptly announced would go toward Harry's room and board, of course. Just make sure it doesn't interfere with your chores here, Aunt Petunia added suspiciously. Of course not, Harry assured her, amazed at how easily they accepted the deception. Later that day, Harry returned to Nightshade's shop, his glamour in place and his story prepared. Ms. Nightshade was helping an elderly wizard when Harry entered, so he browsed quietly until the customer departed. You came back, she observed, approaching him with a small smile. Did you speak with your family? Yes, Harry replied confidently. They said it's fine as long as I'm back by dinner time. They're happy for me to learn responsibility. Ms. Nightshade studied him for a moment, and Harry had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing right through his deception. But she merely nodded and retrieved the wandless magic book from behind the counter. Very well. Let's discuss terms. I need help cataloging new acquisitions, organizing shelves, and occasionally assisting customers when I'm busy. In exchange, you'll earn this book and, if you prove reliable, perhaps others in the future. Does that sound fair? More than fair, Harry agreed eagerly. Good. We'll start with basics today, how the shop is organized, where everything belongs. She extended her hand. Welcome to Nightshade's, Mr. Harry hesitated only briefly. Evans, he said, using his mother's maiden name. Harry Evans. If Ms. Nightshade recognized the deception, she gave no sign of it. Well then, Mr. Evans, let's begin your education in the fine art of magical bookselling. The work was fascinating. MS. Nightshade's organization system categorized books not just by subject but by magical affinity, theoretical approach, and historical context. Harry learned more about the structure of magical knowledge in one afternoon than he had in months of reading individual texts. Ms. Nightshade herself proved to be a walking encyclopedia of magical literature. She could identify obscure references, recall publication details of centuries-old texts, and explain complex magical theories in accessible terms. More importantly, she seemed genuinely interested in Harry's questions, never dismissing them as childish or inappropriate. You have an unusual perspective for someone your age, she commented as Harry helped shelve a new shipment of books. Almost as if you've been exposed to older magical traditions. Harry tensed momentarily. I read a lot, he said carefully. Clearly. She handed him a thick tome on magical history. This just arrived, a revised edition of Magical Britain, The Medieval Foundations. You might find it interesting. By the end of the day, Harry had earned both the wandless magic book and Ms. Nightshade's tentative approval. They arranged for him to return the following weekend, and Harry left the shop feeling more connected to the wizarding world than ever before. Over the following months, Harry's weekends fell into a new pattern. Saturdays were spent at Nightshade's, learning the bookselling trade and absorbing knowledge from both the texts he handled and Ms. Nightshade herself. Sundays were dedicated to Slytherin's sanctuary, where he continued his magical practice and shared what he'd learned with the increasingly concerned Echo. This bookseller knows more than she reveals, Slytherin warned after Harry described a conversation about wandless magic. She tests your knowledge, probes your understanding. She's just being friendly, Harry argued, though part of him recognized the truth in Slytherin's assessment. Ms. Nightshade did seem unusually interested in Harry's magical education, often recommending books just slightly beyond what a typical child his age would understand. Yet despite this concern, Harry couldn't deny the value of his time at the bookshop. He was learning not just about magic, but about the culture and society of the wizarding world. Customers often chatted with Ms. Nightshade about current events, ministry politics, and Hogwarts gossip. Harry absorbed it all, building a mental map of the world he would soon officially join. By late summer, Harry had earned 5 books through his work at the shop and had read dozens more during quiet periods. Ms. Nightshade gradually entrusted him with more responsibility, helping customers find specific texts, unpacking delicate shipments, even assisting with basic magical cataloging that required him to identify a book's magical signature. This last task had initially worried Harry, as he had no wand to perform the standard detection spells. But he discovered that his well-developed wandless abilities were actually an advantage. He could sense magical energies directly, without the filtering effect of a wand. Remarkable, Ms. Nightshade had commented the first time she witnessed this. Most wizards require years of practice to develop such sensitivity. Harry had shrugged, uncomfortable with the scrutiny. It just feels natural to me. As his 11th birthday approached, the age when he would officially receive his Hogwarts letter, Harry found himself increasingly torn between excitement and anxiety. His time at the sanctuary and the bookshop had given him magical knowledge and skills far beyond what a first-year student should possess. How would he explain this without revealing his secrets? Moreover, the echo of Slytherin had become increasingly insistent that Harry should conceal his true abilities, presenting himself as talented but not exceptional. The wizarding world has expectations for their boy who lived, it warned. They will attempt to mold you, to guide you along paths they've chosen. Your unusual knowledge would raise questions that might lead to the discovery of my sanctuary. Harry understood the logic, yet the thought of deliberately hiding his abilities frustrated him. He had worked hard to develop his magic, spending countless hours practicing and studying. The idea of pretending to be less capable than he was felt dishonest. I won't lie about who I am, he told the echo firmly. I'll be discreet, but I won't pretend to be someone I'm not. A noble sentiment, Slytherin replied, but perhaps an impractical one. Consider the advantage of being underestimated. This conversation repeated in various forms as Harry's 11th birthday drew nearer. Meanwhile, his relationship with Ms. Nightshade continued to evolve. She had begun teaching him more advanced concepts during quiet periods at the shop, guiding his reading with suggestions that seemed specifically tailored to his interests and abilities. You have a gift for sensing magical resonances, she observed one afternoon as Harry correctly identified a book's protective enchantments without being told what they were. Have you considered focusing your studies in that direction when you reach Hogwarts? Harry froze. How did you? Your age is rather obvious, Mr. Evans, she replied with a small smile. And magical children in Britain attend Hogwarts. It's hardly a leap of deduction. Right, Harry said, relieved that she hadn't somehow discerned his true identity. Professor Flitwick, the charms instructor, would be an excellent mentor for someone with your particular talents, she continued. Though I suspect you might find yourself in Slytherin House, where Professor Snape favors more practical applications of magic. You attended Hogwarts? Harry asked, realizing he knew very little about Ms. Nightshade's background. Ravenclaw, she confirmed. Though the Sorting Hat considered Slytherin for nearly a full minute. A common dilemma for those who value both knowledge and ambition. This casual reference to the sorting ceremony, something Slytherin had mentioned but not described in detail, sparked Harry's curiosity. How exactly does the sorting work? I've heard about the different houses, but not how students are assigned to them. Ms. Nightshade's eyes twinkled with amusement. That, Mr. Evans, is a tradition best experienced firsthand. I wouldn't want to spoil the surprise. As July drew to a close, Harry's anticipation reached a fever pitch. His Hogwarts letter would arrive any day now. The Dursleys knew nothing about it, of course, and Harry had no intention of enlightening them until necessary. He had already devised a plan to collect his letter before they could interfere. Each morning, he woke early and waited near the mail slot, ready to intercept the distinctive parchment envelope Slytherin had described. Ms. Nightshade had also mentioned that Hogwarts letters typically arrived in late July or early August, delivered by owl for magical families but through the Muggle post for those living in non-magical households. On the morning of July 31st, Harry's 11th birthday, his vigilance was rewarded. Among the usual bills and advertisements lay a thick envelope of yellowish parchment, addressed in emerald green ink to Mr. H. Potter. The cupboard under the stairs 4, Privet Drive. Little whinging Surrey. Harry's heart pounded as he quickly tucked the letter into his oversized shirt and took the remaining mail to the kitchen table. Neither Uncle Vernon nor Aunt Petunia noticed anything amiss, too focused on Dudley's complaints about his breakfast portion. Later, safely locked in his cupboard, Harry broke the purple wax seal bearing the Hogwarts crest, a lion, eagle, badger, and snake surrounding the letter H. The parchment felt heavy and expensive between his fingers as he unfolded his official welcome to the wizarding world. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, Order of Merlin, First Class, Grand Source, CHF, Warlock, Supreme Mugwump, International Confide, of Wizards. Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall, Deputy Headmistress. Harry read the letter 3 times, a grin spreading across his face. Then he examined the second page, which listed the required supplies, robes, books, a wand, a cauldron, and other magical equipment. The only problem was the response deadline. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Today. Harry had no owl, and no immediate way to send a magical message. He would need to visit Diagon Alley immediately, but how? The Dursleys would never willingly take him shopping for wizard supplies, even if he revealed everything. And while Harry had become quite adept at subtly influencing their behavior, completely changing their deeply ingrained prejudices against magic seemed beyond his current abilities. Harry decided his best option was to visit Ms. Nightshade. She would know how to send a message to Hogwarts, and might even help him acquire his school supplies. It was Saturday anyway, his regular day to work at the bookshop. Emerging from his cupboard, Harry approached Aunt Petunia, who was aggressively cleaning kitchen counters that were already spotless. I'm going to my job now, he said, the subtle compulsion he'd been using for months making his words seem perfectly reasonable. I should be back by dinner. Make sure you are, she replied without looking up. Vernon wants the garden weeded tomorrow. Harry nodded and slipped out the front door, his Hogwarts letter securely tucked into his pocket. As he walked to the bus stop, excitement bubbled through him. After years of preparation, he was finally, officially a wizard in training. When Harry arrived at Nightshade's Rare Volumes, the shop was unusually busy. A family with twin boys about Harry's age was purchasing a stack of books on magical creatures, while an elderly witch examined a display of historical biographies. Harry waited patiently, helping other customers as needed until the rush subsided. Quite the morning, Ms. Nightshade commented as the last customer departed. Summer holidays always bring an increase in business. She studied Harry's face, noting his barely contained excitement. You seem particularly energetic today, Mr. Evans. Special occasion? Harry glanced around to ensure they were alone, then pulled out his Hogwarts letter. It's my birthday, he said. And this arrived. Ms. Nightshade examined the letter without touching it, a knowing smile spreading across her face. Congratulations are in order, then. Both for your birthday and your official welcome to the wizarding world. Mr. Potter. Harry stared at her in shock. You knew. Not at first, she admitted, gesturing for him to take a seat at the small table where they sometimes catalogued books. But I began to suspect after our third or fourth session together. Your knowledge of certain magical concepts, your unusual ability with wandless magic, the lightning scar your glamour doesn't quite conceal when you're tired. Small clues that added up over time. Harry's mind raced. Had she told anyone? Was his cover blown completely? Don't worry, she said, seeming to read his thoughts. Your secret has remained just that, a secret. I assumed you had your reasons for the disguise, and it wasn't my place to interfere. Relief flooded through Harry, followed quickly by confusion. But why help me? Why give me books, teach me things, if you knew I was, well, me? Ms. Nightshade considered her response carefully. Because you were clearly a child hungry for knowledge, trying to understand a world that had been kept from you. And because, contrary to what some might believe, Harry Potter deserves the chance to discover himself on his own terms, not solely through the expectations others place upon him. This unexpected understanding brought a lump to Harry's throat. For nearly 3 years, his only confidant had been the echo of Slytherin, an entity with its own agenda. Ms. Nightshade seemed to offer something different, support without manipulation. Thank you, he said simply. For everything. You're welcome, Harry. She smiled warmly, then nodded toward the letter. Now, it seems you have a response to send. Hogwarts is quite strict about its deadlines. That's why I came, Harry admitted. I don't have an owl. Easily remedied. Ms. Nightshade moved to the back of the shop, returning with a small writing set and a tawny owl perched on her arm. Hermes is quite reliable, and knows the way to Hogwarts well. Harry quickly penned a response confirming his attendance, addressed it as Ms. Nightshade instructed, and attached it to the owl's leg. Hermes gave a soft hoot, nipped Harry's finger gently, and took off through a small window near the ceiling. Now, Ms. Nightshade said, a practical tone entering her voice, we should discuss your school supplies. I assume your guardians are not aware of your magical heritage. Harry grimaced. They know, actually. They just hate it. They've spent years trying to stamp it out of me, as Uncle Vernon puts it. Ms. Nightshade's expression darkened momentarily. I see. Well, then we'll need to make alternative arrangements. You'll need to access your family vault at Gringotts first. The Potters were a wealthy family, and your parents would have left provisions for your education. I have a vault. With money? Harry asked, surprised despite everything he'd learned. Indeed. Quite a substantial one, I would imagine. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. The challenge will be accessing it without alerting certain interested parties that you've been in Diagon Alley without official escort. You mean Dumbledore, Harry said. The Hogwarts headmaster's name had appeared frequently in his research, always as a figure of immense power and influence in Wizarding Britain. Among others, Ms. Nightshade confirmed. Many people take a keen interest in your whereabouts, Harry. Which is why we'll need to be somewhat creative. The plan they devised was elegant in its simplicity. Ms. Nightshade would close the shop for the day, claiming a family emergency. She would accompany Harry to Gringotts, introducing herself as his temporary magical guardian, a role she could reasonably claim as a shopkeeper who had been instructing him in preliminary magical studies. The goblins of Gringotts, she explained, cared primarily about proper authorization and magical signatures, not wizarding politics. With Harry's key, which she suspected would be held in trust but accessible to him upon request, and his magical signature, they could access his vault without involving the ministry or Hogwarts staff. But I don't have a key, Harry pointed out. The goblins can verify your identity magically, Ms. Nightshade assured him. It's a more complex process, but for someone of your status, they'll accommodate the request. And so, for the second time, Harry ventured into Diagon Alley, this time with a knowledgeable guide and a clear purpose. Ms. Nightshade helped him strengthen his glamour charm, subtly altering his appearance enough that he wouldn't be immediately recognizable while still allowing his magical signature to read true for the goblin's verification. Gringotts was as imposing inside as out. Marble floors, high counters staffed by goblins examining jewels or counting coins, wizards and witches conducting business in hushed tones. Ms. Nightshade approached a counter with confidence, Harry following close behind. "We wish to access the Potter Trust Vault," she stated quietly to the goblin teller. The young heir does not currently possess his key but is prepared to undergo identity verification. The goblin peered down at Harry with shrewd eyes. "Standard procedure requires notification of the magical guardian in such cases. I am acting as temporary magical guide by family request," Ms. Nightshade replied smoothly. "The permanent guardian has been notified of our visit." This wasn't strictly true, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. The Dursleys knew Harry was out, they just didn't know where. The goblin seemed skeptical but nodded. "Very well. Griphook will handle the verification and vault access. Wait there." He pointed to a small seating area. Minutes later, a younger goblin appeared and led them down a torchlit corridor to a small office. The verification process was uncomfortable but brief: a drop of Harry's blood on an enchanted parchment, a few questions about his earliest memories, and a magical scan that made his skin tingle unpleasantly. "Identity confirmed," Griphook announced. "The Potter Trust Vault is accessible to the heir. Follow me." What followed was Harry's first ride on the Gringotts cart system, a dizzying journey deep beneath London to vault number 687. When Griphook opened the heavy door, Harry could only stare in amazement at the piles of gold, silver, and bronze coins that gleamed in the lamplight. "Your trust vault," the goblin explained dispassionately. "Established by your parents for educational expenses and basic needs until you reach majority. The main Potter family vaults will become accessible when you turn 17. Harry filled a pouch with coins as Ms. Nightshade explained the wizarding currency system: 17 silver sickles to a gold galleon, 29 bronze nuts to a sickle. The amount seemed enormous to Harry, who had never had spending money of his own before. "This should cover all your school supplies with plenty to spare," Ms. Nightshade assured him as they left Gringotts. "Now, let's gather what you need." The shopping expedition that followed was one of the most enjoyable experiences of Harry's life. They purchased robes at Madame Malkin's, narrowly avoiding a pale blonde boy who was just leaving as they entered, a cauldron and potion supplies from the apothecary, and a magnificent snowy owl from Elops that immediately took a liking to Harry. "Every student needs a familiar," Ms. Nightshade said when Harry protested the expense. "And owls are particularly useful for communication." Harry named the owl Hedwig, after a famous which he'd read about in one of Ms. Nightshade's historical texts. The owl seemed to approve, nipping his finger affectionately. Their final stop was Ollivander's for Harry's wand. Ms. Nightshade suggested Harry go in alone. A wand choosing is a personal experience, while she waited with his other purchases. The wand-maker's shop was narrow and dusty, with thousands of narrow boxes stacked to the ceiling. Mr. Ollivander himself proved to be an unsettling figure with pale, moon-like eyes that seemed to see too much. "Ah, yes," he said softly upon seeing Harry. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter. You have your mother's eyes." Harry tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his wand pocket, empty, of course. "How did you? The glamour is quite good," Ollivander assured him, "but wands respond to the true person, not the outer appearance. Your secret is safe with me." He smiled mysteriously. "Now, let's find your match." What followed was a lengthy process of trial and error. Wand after wand was placed in Harry's hand, only to be snatched away after producing inadequate or disastrous results. Far from being discouraged, Ollivander seemed increasingly excited with each failure. "Tricky customer," he murmured. "Not to worry, the perfect match is here somewhere. I wonder." He disappeared into the back of the shop, returning with a dusty box. Holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple. An unusual combination. The moment Harry grasped this wand, he knew it was different. Warmth spread through his fingers, and when he gave it a wave, a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework. Curious, Ollivander said softly. Very curious. What's curious? Harry asked, still admiring his new wand. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. The phoenix whose feather resides in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar. Harry stared at the wand maker, a chill running down his spine. Voldemort's wand. Ollivander flinched at the name but nodded. The wand chooses the wizard, Mr. Potter. I think we can expect great things from you. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great. Harry paid 7 galleons for the wand and left quickly, disturbed by this connection to his parents' murderer. Ms. Nightshade noticed his expression but asked no questions as they gathered his remaining purchases and headed back toward her shop. What happens now? Harry asked as they arranged for his school supplies to be temporarily stored at Nightshade's. The Dursleys will never take me to King's Cross for the train. Let's solve one problem at a time, Ms. Nightshade advised. First, you'll need a convincing explanation for your new owl and eventually your trunk of supplies. Perhaps another small compulsion, suggesting that your school contacted them about a scholarship program that provides materials to deserving students. Harry nodded. He could manage that level of magical suggestion now, especially with the Dursleys' existing desire to believe anything that cost them nothing. As for September 1st, we have a month to arrange transportation. I can take you to King's Cross myself, if necessary. She hesitated, then added, Harry, now that you're officially entering the wizarding world, have you considered how much of your additional knowledge you plan to reveal? This was the question that had troubled Harry for months. He had abilities and knowledge far beyond first-year level, yet revealing them might raise uncomfortable questions about their source. I'm still deciding, he answered honestly. I won't pretend to be less than I am, but I also don't want to draw too much attention. He thought of Slytherin's echo and its warnings. Some secrets need to stay secret, at least for now. Ms. Nightshade nodded approvingly. A wise approach. The wizarding world will have enough expectations of the boy who lived without adding prodigy to the list. As Harry prepared to return to Privet Drive, his mind was already racing ahead to September 1st. After years of preparation, months of anticipation, he would finally be joining the wizarding world properly, attending Hogwarts, meeting other young witches and wizards, learning magic openly instead of in secret. Yet beneath the excitement lay a current of unease. The echo of Slytherin had been increasingly insistent about the dangers awaiting him, not just from those who might fear his connection to Voldemort, but from those who would seek to control him, to shape him into their idea of what the boy who lived should be. Harry was determined to chart his own course. With the knowledge from Slytherin's sanctuary, the guidance of Ms. Nightshade, and now the official tools of a wizard, he felt better prepared than most first years. Whatever challenges Hogwarts held, Harry Potter would face them on his own terms, armed with knowledge no wizard had known for 1,000 years. Chapter 2, Hidden in Plain Sight. The final month before Hogwarts passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Harry split his time between practicing with his new wand, studying his course books, and making regular visits to both Slytherin's sanctuary and Nightshade's shop. His new wand changed everything. After years of forcing magic through his fingertips, channeling it through a properly matched conduit felt like breathing after a lifetime of restricted airflow. Spells that had required intense concentration came effortlessly now, and new ones from his textbooks took only a few attempts to master. Wingardium Leviosa, Harry whispered, swishing and flicking his wand at a pillow in his cupboard. It rose smoothly to the ceiling, hovering there until he lowered it gently back to his cot. Hedwig watched from her perch on the cupboard shelf, head tilted curiously. Harry had convinced the Dursleys that keeping the bloody bird in his cupboard was preferable to having it fly around the house. Another small compulsion had them ignoring her occasional departures and returns through his cracked window at night. This is brilliant, he told the owl, who hooted softly in agreement. It's like the difference between pushing a boulder uphill and rolling it down. His textbooks proved disappointingly basic after years of studying Slytherin's advanced texts, but Harry dutifully read them anyway. Understanding the foundations would help him blend in, and occasionally he found interesting historical context absent from the ancient library's collection. The Echo of Slytherin was notably displeased by these developments. A wand makes magic easier, yes, but also more predictable, more limited, it complained during one of Harry's visits to the sanctuary. The modern fixation on wand channeling has weakened Wizardkin's connection to raw magical energy. Maybe, Harry conceded, but it's also incredibly efficient. And I'll need to use one at Hogwarts without standing out. You still intend to hide your true capabilities, the Echo observed, a note of approval in its mental voice. Not hide exactly, Harry clarified. Just not show everything at once. I'll still be myself, but there's no reason to reveal all my cards immediately. The Echo seemed satisfied with this approach. Wise. The wizarding world fears what it does not understand, and your abilities would certainly qualify. Harry's visits to Nightshade's shop took on a different character now that his identity was known to Ms. Nightshade. She shifted from subtle guidance to more direct preparation for Hogwarts, sharing insights about the professors, house dynamics, and unwritten social rules of the wizarding world. Professor McGonagall values precision and effort, she advised while helping Harry organize his new school supplies. She'll recognize your talent quickly, but don't rely on that alone to impress her. And Snape? Harry asked, recalling her earlier mention of Slytherin's head of house. Ms. Nightshade's expression turned complex. Severus Snape is complicated. Brilliant at potions, undoubtedly, but prone to favoritism and carrying old grudges. He knew your parents, though not favorably. He didn't like my parents? Harry asked, surprised. Your father and his friends had a rather antagonistic relationship with him during their school years, she said carefully. And your mother, that's a more complicated story, one perhaps best learned from other sources. This vague answer frustrated Harry, but he'd learned that Ms. Nightshade had clear boundaries about certain topics. She would guide but not direct him, inform but not influence his opinions. Just be prepared for initial coldness, she continued. Judge him by his actions over time, not first impressions. August 31st arrived with unexpected tension at number 4, Privet Drive. Harry had planned to simply slip away the next morning with another compulsion making the Dursleys forget to question his absence. But at dinner, Uncle Vernon unexpectedly broached the subject. Boy, he said gruffly, pushing away his empty plate. About this school of yours. Harry nearly choked on his water. In all their years together, Uncle Vernon had never voluntarily mentioned anything related to magic. What about it? Harry asked cautiously. Vernon's face reddened slightly. We've been told we're to take you to King's Cross tomorrow. Platform 9. Something. Platform 9 3/4, Harry supplied, mind racing. Who had told them this? He'd arranged everything with Ms. Nightshade. Don't say the number. Vernon snapped, looking around as though ministry officials might be hiding behind the curtains. Anyway, we're going to London tomorrow regardless. Dudley needs to have that ruddy tail removed before Smelting's term begins. Harry blinked, utterly confused. Tail. Don't play dumb, Aunt Petunia hissed. That giant's handiwork. What giant? Harry was genuinely bewildered now. The Dursleys exchanged suspicious looks. The one who delivered your letter, Vernon said slowly. The one who gave Dudley a pig's tail when we declined. Dudley whimpered slightly, hands moving protectively to his backside. Harry struggled to keep his expression neutral. Someone had clearly visited the Dursleys regarding his Hogwarts attendance, someone large enough to be called a giant, magical enough to give Dudley a pig's tail, and official enough to be tasked with delivering his letter. But Harry had intercepted his letter weeks ago. He'd never seen any giant. Right, he said slowly. That giant. I thought you meant, a different one. Vernon grunted, apparently accepting this weak explanation. We'll drop you at the station. After that, you're on your own until summer. And don't expect us to write, either. Wouldn't dream of it, Harry muttered. Later, locked in his cupboard, Harry mulled over this strange conversation. There had clearly been some kind of magical interference with the Dursleys, likely from Hogwarts staff who believed Harry hadn't received his letter. Someone had visited, possibly assessed his living conditions, the cupboard, and intimidated the Dursleys into cooperating. This complicates things, he whispered to Hedwig, who was preening her feathers on his pillow. Someone's keeping tabs on me. He scribbled a quick note to Ms. Nightshade explaining the development and sent Hedwig off into the night. She returned shortly before dawn with a brief reply, Hagrid, most likely. Gamekeeper at Hogwarts. Loyal to Dumbledore. Accept the ride. Meet me on platform as planned. Harry relaxed slightly. If Ms. Nightshade wasn't concerned, perhaps this was standard procedure for Muggle-raised students. Still, it reinforced Slytherin's warnings about the attention focused on Harry Potter. The next morning was chaotic. Dudley was terrified of Harry, shuffling sideways like a crab whenever they were in the same room. Aunt Petunia was jumpy and snappish. Uncle Vernon loaded Harry's trunk into the car with excessive force, muttering about freaks and unnaturalness the entire time. The drive to London passed in tense silence. When they reached King's Cross, Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a trolley, barked, "Platform 9 3/4 that way," with a vague wave toward platforms 9 and 10, and drove off with Petunia and Dudley before Harry could even respond. "Thanks for nothing," Harry muttered, pushing his trolley toward the platforms. Hedwig hooted indignantly from her cage. The station was busy with Sunday morning travelers. Harry made his way to the barrier between platforms 9 and 10, where Ms. Nightshade had explained he would find the hidden entrance to the wizarding platform. He was about to approach when a large family of redheads caught his attention. Packed with Muggles, of course, the plump woman's casual use of Muggles identified them immediately as a wizarding family. Harry watched as she guided her children toward the very barrier he was approaching. One by one, the older boys pushed their trolleys straight at the solid wall and vanished. This matched Ms. Nightshade's description, but seeing it performed in broad daylight was still surprising. Harry hung back, observing. There were still 2 children with the mother, a boy about Harry's age and a younger girl who wouldn't be starting Hogwarts yet. "You next, Ron," the woman said, gesturing to her youngest son. Harry decided to approach after the boy went through. He could follow their example without drawing attention to his first attempt. "Excuse me," he said to the woman after the boy disappeared, "is this how to get onto platform 9 3/4? I'm new, you see." The woman smiled kindly. "First time at Hogwarts?" "Ron's new too." She explained the process, just as Ms. Nightshade had, and encouraged Harry to go through before her daughter. "Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous," she advised. Harry thanked her, aligned his trolley with the barrier, and walked forward with confidence. Despite knowing what to expect, he couldn't help closing his eyes just before impact. Instead of a crash, he felt a strange whooshing sensation, and when he opened his eyes, he was standing on a crowded platform beside a scarlet steam engine labeled Hogwarts Express. Families crowded the platform, parents helping children with trunks, friends reuniting after summer holidays, younger siblings looking envious or tearful. Owls hooted, cats wove between legs, and the occasional toad made a bid for freedom. Harry pushed his trolley forward, scanning the crowd for Ms. Nightshade. He found her near the middle of the platform, wearing elegant navy robes rather than her usual shop attire. She smiled as he approached. "Right on time," she said, helping him maneuver his trunk toward the train. "Any trouble with your relatives?" "None, apart from finding out someone from Hogwarts apparently visited them," Harry replied quietly. "Gave my cousin a pig's tail." Ms. Nightshade's lips twitched. "Hagrid has a distinctive approach to problem solving." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. We should get your trunk aboard. Better if we're not seen together too obviously. With a quick charm, she lightened Harry's trunk enough for him to easily lift it onto the train. They found an empty compartment near the back, where Harry stowed his luggage in the overhead rack. "Remember what we discussed," Ms. Nightshade said as they stood by the compartment door. "Observe before acting. Learn the landscape before revealing your strengths. And if you need anything," she pressed a small, polished stone into his palm, "hold this and speak my name 3 times. It's not a direct communication device, but it will alert me that you wish to talk." Harry closed his fingers around the stone, feeling a faint magical resonance. "Thank you. For everything. You'll do wonderfully," she assured him, then checked her watch. "I should go. The train leaves in 15 minutes, and you'll want to settle in." With a final nod, she slipped away into the crowd on the platform. Harry sat by the window, watching families say their goodbyes with a mixture of interest and a twinge of something like longing. No one would be waving tearfully as he departed, though perhaps that was for the best, given the Dursleys. The compartment door slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy from the platform peered in. "Anyone sitting there?" he asked, pointing to the seat opposite Harry. "Everywhere else is full." "Go ahead," Harry invited. Making friends early seemed wise. This boy came from a wizarding family and might provide valuable cultural insights. The boy sat down, introduced himself as Ron Weasley, and soon they were engaged in conversation about Hogwarts, wizard chess, and the complexities of having 5 older brothers. Harry shared a sanitized version of his own background, mentioning the Dursleys' dislike of magic but omitting his years of secret study. Their conversation was interrupted several times, first by Ron's twin brothers checking in, then by a round-faced boy looking for his lost toad, followed by a bushy-haired girl named Hermione Granger who was helping in the search. Hermione's rapid-fire delivery and obvious intelligence caught Harry's attention immediately. She'd already read all their course books and tried a few simple spells. Her enthusiasm for knowledge reminded him of his own early days in Slytherin's sanctuary. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "Neville's lost one," she said, barely pausing for breath. Her eyes landed on Harry with sudden recognition. "Holy cricket, you're Harry Potter. I've read all about you. You're in modern magical history, the rise and fall of the dark arts, and great wizarding events of the 20th century." Harry tensed. "Am I?" "Of course. You're famous." After she left, Ron explained more about Harry's fame in the wizarding world. Though Slytherin had told him the basics, hearing it from Ron's perspective, with appropriate awe and a child's understanding of the events, gave Harry new insight into how he would be perceived at Hogwarts. "Everyone knows your name," Ron said. "You're the boy who lived." The conversation shifted to houses, with Ron explaining his family's long history in Gryffindor. "Imagine if they put me in Slytherin," he said with a dramatic shudder. "I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Harry frowned slightly. "What's wrong with Slytherin? Are you joking? That's where all the dark wizards come from. You know who was in Slytherin." This categorical dismissal bothered Harry more than he expected. "I doubt every Slytherin becomes a dark wizard," he said carefully. "Houses are just about personality traits, right?" Ron looked unconvinced but dropped the subject when another visitor appeared, a pale, blonde boy flanked by 2 larger boys. Harry recognized him from Madame Malkin's shop in Diagon Alley. "Is it true?" the boy asked. "They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment." "Yes," Harry replied simply, studying the newcomer. Everything about him, from his sleek hair to his expensive robes to his entitled tone, screamed privileged pureblood. "This is Crabbe and Goyle," the boy said casually, nodding to his companions. "And I'm Malfoy. Draco Malfoy." Ron gave a slight cough that might have been hiding a snigger. Draco's eyes narrowed. "Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. Red hair, freckles, and hand-me-down robes. You must be a Weasley." He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find that some wizarding families are better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He extended his hand, but Harry didn't take it. Everything about this interaction felt like a test of Harry's values, his awareness of wizarding politics, and his potential alliances. I think I can figure out the wrong sort for myself, thanks, Harry said coolly. Draco's pale cheeks flushed pink. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. Hang around with riffraff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you. Both Harry and Ron stood up. Say that again, Ron said, face reddening. Harry placed a hand on Ron's arm, holding him back. That's enough, Malfoy, he said quietly, his voice carrying a hint of power that made the compartment suddenly feel a few degrees colder. I suggest you leave. Something in Harry's tone made Draco step back involuntarily. You'll regret this, Potter, he said, but the threat sounded hollow. He jerked his head at his companions and departed. Blimey, Harry, Ron said, staring at him. How'd you do that? Do what? Make him back down like that. For a second there, you seemed different. Harry shrugged, inwardly chiding himself for letting his magic leak into his voice. Just stood my ground. Bullies usually back down if you don't show fear. The rest of the journey passed more pleasantly. They changed into their school robes as darkness fell, and eventually the train slowed to a stop at Hogsmeade Station. Following the booming voice of Hagrid, who was indeed giant-sized, the first years made their way down a steep, narrow path to the edge of a great black lake. No more N4 to a boat. Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron shared a boat with Hermione and Neville. As they rounded a bend, Hogwarts came into view for the first time, a vast castle perched atop a mountain, its windows sparkling against the starry sky. It's magnificent, Harry whispered, genuinely awed despite everything he'd read about the school. No description could capture the magical presence of the castle, which seemed to pulse with ancient power. After crossing the lake, climbing a passageway in the rock, and ascending a flight of stone steps, the first years gathered before huge oak doors. Hagrid knocked 3 times, and the doors swung open to reveal a tall, black-haired witch in emerald green robes. The first years, Professor McGonagall, Hagrid announced. Thank you, Hagrid. I will take them from here. Professor McGonagall led them across the flagged stone floor into a small, empty chamber off the hall. She welcomed them to Hogwarts and explained the house system, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin, emphasizing that their house would be like their family. The sorting ceremony will take place in a few minutes in front of the rest of the school, she concluded. I suggest you all smarten yourselves up as much as you can while you are waiting. As she left, nervous chatter broke out among the first years. Ron was convinced they'd have to perform some kind of test, while Hermione was frantically whispering spells she might need. Harry remained quiet, focusing on strengthening his mental shields as Slytherin had taught him. The Sorting Hat would be examining his mind, and there were certain secrets he preferred to keep private. Professor McGonagall returned and led them into the Great Hall, a spectacular space with thousands of candles floating above 4 long tables where the rest of the students sat. The ceiling appeared to open directly to the night sky, prompting Hermione to whisper, "It's bewitched to look like the sky outside. I read about it in Hogwarts, a history." At the front of the hall, Professor McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool and, atop it, a pointed wizard's hat, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. To the surprise of many first years, the hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and it began to sing about the 4 houses and their founders. When it finished, the hall burst into applause. Professor McGonagall stepped forward with a long roll of parchment. "When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted," she said. Abbott, Hannah. A pink-faced girl with blonde pigtails stumbled out of line, put on the hat, and sat down. After a moment's pause, Hufflepuff, shouted the hat. The table on the right cheered as Hannah went to sit with them. The sorting continued alphabetically. Harry observed each student's placement, noting patterns in how quickly the hat decided and which tables cheered loudest for which houses. Granger, Hermione. Hermione almost ran to the stool and jammed the hat eagerly on her head. The hat took nearly a full minute before declaring, Gryffindor. Ron groaned beside Harry, having earlier expressed hope she'd be in another house. As Malfoy, Draco, was called, Harry's attention shifted to the teacher's table. His eyes met those of a hook-nosed professor with greasy black hair and sallow skin. A sharp, hot pain shot across the scar on Harry's forehead, so sudden and intense that he nearly gasped. "You all right?" Ron whispered. "Fine," Harry replied, quickly reinforcing his mental shields as Slytherin had taught him. The pain receded immediately, which was interesting, and concerning. "Potter, Harry." As Harry stepped forward, whispers broke out across the hall. "Potter, did she say? The Harry Potter?" The last thing Harry saw before the hat dropped over his eyes was the hall full of people craning to get a good look at him. Then he was staring at the black inside of the hat, waiting. Said a small voice in his ear. "Difficult. Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes, and such knowledge for one so young. But what's this? Secrets already? Interesting, and a thirst to prove yourself. But where to put you?" Harry gripped the edges of the stool, thinking, not just Slytherin. Not just for being a Parselmouth. Not just Slytherin, said the small voice. "Are you sure? You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin would help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. But I see you've already found some of Slytherin's greatest secrets, haven't you? Fascinating. I haven't seen a mind like yours in centuries." The hat seemed to be probing deeper, and Harry felt it brushing against his mental shields. He carefully allowed it access to his general knowledge and personality traits while keeping the sanctuary and Slytherin's echo hidden behind stronger barriers. "Oh my," the hat murmured, sounding almost delighted. "A clemency at your age? Most unusual. You're protecting something valuable, something ancient. I can feel its shadow on your mind." Harry tensed. "Just sort me properly," he thought firmly. "Where I belong, not where others expect." "Very well," the hat said. "With a mind like yours, curious, strategic, and already so knowledgeable, better be Ravenclaw." The last word was shouted to the entire hall. Harry removed the hat and walked shakily toward the Ravenclaw table, where students were clapping enthusiastically, some standing to get a better look at him. He noticed Ron's surprised expression and Malfoy's scowl from the Slytherin table. "We got Potter," a Ravenclaw prefect was saying excitedly, making room for Harry to sit. "Welcome to Ravenclaw, Potter." Harry smiled and thanked him, then turned to watch the remaining sorting. Ron eventually joined Gryffindor with his brothers, looking slightly disappointed to be separated from his new friend. After Zabini, Blaise, was sorted into Slytherin, Professor McGonagall rolled up her scroll and took the sorting hat away. Albus Dumbledore rose to his feet, beaming at the students with his arms opened wide. "Welcome," he said. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, nitwit. Blubber. Oddment. Tweak. Thank you." As food appeared magically on the golden plates, Harry studied the headmaster with interest. This was the man Slytherin's echo had warned him about, powerful, influential, and according to the echo, likely to have very specific plans for Harry Potter. "Is he, a bit mad?" Harry asked the prefect beside him. "Dumbledore? Brilliant mind, absolute genius, but yes, a bit eccentric," the prefect replied. "I'm Robert Hilliard, by the way. Ravenclaw prefect." "Nice to meet you," Harry said, helping himself to roast beef and potatoes. "Surprised to see you in Ravenclaw, Potter," said an Asian girl sitting across from him. "Everyone expected Gryffindor, like your parents." "I'm not my parents," Harry replied simply. "The hat thought I belonged here." "We're glad to have you," Hilliard assured him. "Ravenclaw values intelligence, wisdom, creativity, and wit above all. Our founder, Rowena Ravenclaw, believed that learning itself was the greatest treasure." As the prefect continued explaining Ravenclaw traditions, Harry glanced around the great hall, taking in the enchanted ceiling, the floating candles, the ghosts drifting between tables. His gaze returned to the staff table, where he noticed the hook-nosed professor watching him with an inscrutable expression. "Who's that teacher talking to Professor Quirrell?" he asked Hilliard, indicating the turban-wearing man beside the hook-nosed professor. "That's Professor Snape, head of Slytherin House. Teaches potions, but everyone knows he wants Quirrell's job. Defense against the dark arts," Hilliard explained. "Not surprised he's watching you. You're a celebrity, after all." Harry frowned slightly. Ms. Nightshade had warned him about Snape's complicated history with his parents. The sharp pain in his scar when their eyes had met was troubling, but Harry kept his expression neutral as he continued eating. After dessert, Dumbledore rose again to give start-of-term notices, including a warning about the forbidden third-floor corridor, to everyone who does not wish to die a very painful death. This casual reference to potential mortal danger struck Harry as oddly cavalier for a school announcement, but the other students seemed to take it in stride. Following the school song, sung by everyone to different tunes at different speeds, the prefects led their houses from the Great Hall. The Ravenclaws climbed a spiral staircase in a tower on the west side of the castle, eventually reaching a door with a bronze knocker in the shape of an eagle. "Unlike other houses, we don't use passwords," Hilliard explained. "To enter our common room, you must answer a riddle or puzzle. It promotes quick thinking, a key Ravenclaw trait." As if on cue, the eagle knocker came to life and spoke, "I have cities, but no houses. I have mountains, but no trees. I have water, but no fish. What am I?" The first years looked at each other nervously, but Harry had encountered similar riddles in Slytherin's sanctuary. "A map," he answered confidently. "Well reasoned," said the knocker, and the door swung open. The Ravenclaw common room was a wide, circular room with arched windows draped in blue and bronze silks. The domed ceiling was painted with stars that seemed to move like the night sky, and tables, chairs, and bookcases lined the walls. Opposite the entrance stood a tall statue of a beautiful woman, Rowena Ravenclaw herself. "Boys' dormitories to the right, girls to the left," Hilliard directed. "Your belongings have already been brought up." Harry followed the other first-year boys, including Anthony Goldstein, Michael Corner, and Terry Boot, up to their dormitory. 5 four-poster beds with blue velvet curtains awaited them, their trunks already placed at the foot of each bed. Hedwig's cage sat on a small table near Harry's bed, but the owl herself was absent, likely hunting or in the Ollery. As his dorm mates unpacked and chatted excitedly about classes, Harry sat on his bed and considered his situation. Ravenclaw was an ideal placement, a house where his intelligence and knowledge wouldn't seem as suspicious as they might in Gryffindor or Hufflepuff. His housemates would expect him to be bookish and curious, making his occasional advanced abilities less remarkable. Yet he couldn't afford to relax completely. Between Snape's apparent interest, Dumbledore's watchful presence, and the hat's detection of his secrets, Hogwarts presented its own challenges. He would need to be careful about when and how he revealed his extra knowledge. "Potter, you coming to brush your teeth?" Terry Boot called from the doorway. "In a minute," Harry replied, pulling Slytherin's stone from his pocket. He wouldn't use it tonight, there was no emergency, but knowing he had a connection to Ms. Nightshade provided reassurance. Later, lying in his four-poster with the blue curtains drawn around him, Harry reflected on the day's events. He'd successfully navigated his first interactions with fellow students, been sorted into a house that suited his abilities, and established his initial presence as simply Harry, not just the boy who lived. It was a promising start. With that comforting thought, Harry closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep, untroubled by dreams. The next morning, Harry woke early, already adjusted to the dormitory after years of sleeping in his cupboard. He used the quiet time to explore the Ravenclaw common room, particularly its impressive bookshelves. Many contained standard textbooks and reference materials, but others held rarer volumes, Ravenclaw-authored texts on magical theory, historical accounts from former students, and specialized magical disciplines. "Early riser too, huh?" came a voice behind him. Harry turned to see an older girl with long black hair descending from the girls' dormitory. She wore glasses and carried several thick books under one arm. "I'm Penelope Clearwater, 5th year," she introduced herself. "You're Harry Potter." "Nice to meet you," Harry replied, returning the book he'd been examining to its shelf. "Checking out our collection already?" "Very Ravenclaw of you," she said approvingly. "Any particular interests?" Harry considered his response carefully. "Magical theory, mostly. How spells work, not just how to cast them." Penelope's eyes lit up. "Excellent. Most first-years just want to learn the flashiest charms. If you're interested in theory, you should talk to Professor Flitwick. He's our head of house and a former dueling champion. He understands spell mechanics better than anyone." This aligned with Ms. Nightshade's earlier recommendation, and Harry nodded. "I'll do that." "Is he approachable?" "Absolutely. He holds weekly open office hours just for Ravenclaws, Tuesdays after dinner. But he's so kind you could probably approach him anytime." More students began filtering into the common room, and soon Harry joined his yearmates for breakfast in the Great Hall. Professor Flitwick, a tiny wizard who had to stand on a stack of books to see over his desk, distributed their schedules that morning. He squeaked excitedly when he reached Harry's name, but otherwise treated him like any other student. The first week of classes was both fascinating and frustrating for Harry. Fascinating because he was finally experiencing formal magical education, with proper equipment and instruction. Frustrating because the material was so basic compared to what he already knew. In charms, Professor Flitwick started them with magical theory and simple wand movements, material Harry had mastered years ago. Transfiguration with Professor McGonagall proved more challenging, not because the concepts were difficult, but because Harry had to deliberately restrain himself from performing too well too quickly. When McGonagall demonstrated by transforming her desk into a pig and back, Harry recognized the advanced spell work involved, far beyond first-year level, but something he had studied theoretically in Slytherin's sanctuary. "Transfiguration is some of the most complex and dangerous magic you will learn at Hogwarts," she warned. "Anyone messing around in my class will leave and not come back." Their first practical lesson involved turning matches into needles. Harry deliberately waited until several other students had attempted the spell before succeeding on his third try, producing a perfect silver needle. Only Hermione Granger from Gryffindor matched his performance, earning them both rare smiles from McGonagall. Herbology with Professor Sprout was genuinely new territory. While he'd read about magical plants, Harry had never had the opportunity to work with them directly. Defense against the dark arts, which many students had looked forward to, proved disappointing under Professor Quirrell, whose classroom smelled strongly of garlic and whose stuttering made lectures difficult to follow. History of magic, taught by the ghost Professor Binns, was dreadfully dull. Harry found himself supplementing the monotonous lectures with his own reading, drawing on both Ravenclaw's library and his prior knowledge from Slytherin's texts. The most tense class was potions, held in the dungeons with the Hufflepuffs and taught by Professor Snape. From the moment Harry entered the classroom, he felt Snape's dark eyes tracking him. The professor started with a roll call, pausing at Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly, "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity." A few Hufflepuffs exchanged glances, but the Ravenclaws, ever practical, remained focused. Snape finished calling names and looked up at the class, his eyes cold and empty. "You are here to learn the subtle science and exact art of potion making," he began in barely more than a whisper. The class was silent, hanging on his every word as he described bottling fame, brewing glory, and even stopper death. Potter. Snape said suddenly. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry's mind raced. This was advanced material, certainly not in the first-year textbook. Fortunately, he'd read extensively on potions in Slytherin's sanctuary. The draught of living death, sir, he answered calmly. A powerful sleeping potion. Snape's eyes narrowed slightly. Where would you look if I told you to find me a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat, Harry replied. It's a stone that can save you from most poisons. What is the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir. Also known as aconite. A flicker of something, surprise. Annoyance, crossed Snape's face. Correct, he said curtly. It seems fame isn't everything, though perhaps you believe knowing the answers to advanced questions gives you the right to avoid opening your textbook like your classmates. Harry had, in fact, opened his textbook to the appropriate page while answering. He met Snape's gaze steadily. No, sir. I just find potions interesting and did some reading ahead. Snape stared at him for a long moment, then abruptly turned away. 1 point to Ravenclaw for preparation, he said grudgingly. Now, everyone open your books to page 5. The rest of the lesson involved brewing a simple potion to cure boils. Harry partnered with Anthony Goldstein, carefully guiding their work without being too obvious about his prior knowledge. Their potion turned out perfectly, earning them another reluctant point from Snape, who seemed determined to find fault with Harry's work. That was intense, Anthony commented as they climbed the stairs from the dungeons after class. Does Snape have something against you? Apparently he didn't get along with my father when they were students, Harry explained, recalling Ms. Nightshade's warning. Carrying a grudge against a kid for something his dad did. That's messed up, Anthony said, shaking his head. At least you knew the answers. Where did you learn all that stuff? Just did some extra reading, Harry replied vaguely. Growing up with Muggles, I wanted to be prepared. This explanation satisfied most of his classmates, and Harry's reputation in Ravenclaw quickly developed as a serious, prepared student, knowledgeable but not showy. He answered questions when asked but didn't volunteer information constantly like Hermione Granger, whose hand shot up for every question in their shared classes. By the end of the first week, Harry had established a carefully crafted persona, intelligent but not suspiciously brilliant, prepared but still learning, confident but appropriately humble for a first year. He made friends among the Ravenclaws, particularly with Terry Boot and Padma Patil, who shared his interest in magical theory, and maintained his friendship with Ron Weasley despite their house difference. The weekend brought a welcome break from classes and a chance to explore the castle more thoroughly. Harry spent Saturday morning in the Ravenclaw common room, catching up on homework assignments that were simple but time-consuming. In the afternoon, he decided to visit the library, Hogwarts' famous repository of magical knowledge. Madame Pants, the librarian, gave him a suspicious look as he entered but said nothing as he browsed the shelves. The library was impressive, tens of thousands of books on thousands of subjects, from basic magical education to highly specialized disciplines. But even a cursory examination confirmed what Harry had suspected: the most valuable and dangerous texts would be in the restricted section, separated from the main library by a rope and accessible only with teacher permission. Planning to read the entire library before Christmas, Potter, came a drawling voice. Harry turned to see Draco Malfoy leaning against a nearby shelf, arms crossed and a smirk on his pointed face. Just browsing, Malfoy, Harry replied evenly. Something you're familiar with, or do you only read books your father pre-approves? Draco's pale cheeks colored slightly. Careful, Potter. You might have tricked the Sorting Hat, but you don't belong in Ravenclaw. Everyone knows you should have been in Gryffindor like your blood traitor father. The Hat disagreed, Harry said, turning back to the shelves. Was there something you wanted, or are you just here to demonstrate your ignorance about how the sorting works? Several nearby Ravenclaw third years snickered, and Draco's flush deepened. You'll regret making enemies with me, Potter. My father isn't here, Harry finished for him. And I doubt he'd want his son reporting that he's failing to intimidate a half-blood orphan raised by muggles. Sounds rather ineffective. Draco's hand twitched toward his wand, but Madame Pants appeared between two bookshelves, glaring at them. "This is a library, not a debate hall," she hissed. "If you must argue, do it elsewhere." With a final glare, Draco stalked away. Harry returned to his browsing, but the encounter had put him on edge. Malfoy seemed determined to antagonize him, likely reporting everything back to his father, a man who, according to Ron's whispered explanation, had been a suspected supporter of Voldemort. These political dimensions added another layer of complexity to Harry's situation. In addition to hiding his advanced magical knowledge, he would need to navigate the social landscape of Wizarding Britain, with its blood prejudices, house rivalries, and lingering tensions from the war. After dinner that evening, Harry decided to try accessing Slytherin's sanctuary. He hadn't attempted to connect with the Echo since arriving at Hogwarts, partly because he'd been busy and partly because he wasn't sure if the connection would work at this distance. But now, with questions mounting and challenges ahead, he needed guidance. In his dormitory, Harry drew the blue curtains around his four-poster and cast a simple privacy charm to muffle sounds. He'd told his roommates he needed to write a letter, which wasn't entirely untrue. He did plan to update MS. Nightshade via Hedwig later. Closing his eyes, Harry focused on the mental link he shared with the sanctuary. The Echo had taught him to project his consciousness across space to maintain their connection when he couldn't physically visit the chamber. It was advanced magic, bordering on the mental arts like legilimency, but Harry had practiced diligently over the summer. For several minutes, nothing happened. Harry breathed deeply, visualizing the circular chamber with its thousands of books, the central pedestal, the serpentine decorations. Gradually, he felt a familiar presence touch his mind. "Young speaker," came the Echo's voice, distant but clear. "You have reached Hogwarts safely, I perceive." "I have," Harry replied mentally. "I've been sorted into Ravenclaw." "Interesting. Not Slytherin." The Hat considered it, but felt Ravenclaw suited me better. The Echo was silent for a moment. "Perhaps wise. In Slytherin, you would face greater scrutiny, particularly from its head of house, who seems to harbor animosity toward you. You can sense that?" Harry asked, surprised. "I sense what you experience, when our minds connect thus. This Snape interests me. His aura carries darkness, and something else. Pain, perhaps. Watch him closely." Harry described his first week, the classes, his strategy of moderate performance, the political undercurrents he'd observed. The Echo approved of his cautious approach but urged him to explore the castle more thoroughly. Hogwarts contains many secrets beyond its formal classrooms. Slytherin himself created hidden passages and chambers throughout the structure, some known only to Parselmouths. "Like the Chamber of Secrets?" Harry asked, recalling an oblique reference in a historical text. "Among others," the Echo confirmed. "Listen for the signs, serpentine decorations often mark entrances. But move cautiously. Dumbledore misses little, and the portraits report to him." Harry hadn't considered that the hundreds of portraits throughout the castle might be monitoring students' activities. Another layer of surveillance to navigate. What about the third-floor corridor Dumbledore mentioned? The one that's forbidden? Curious timing, the Echo mused. Hogwarts has dangerous areas, but they are typically warded against students, not merely verbally prohibited. Something valuable or powerful must be hidden there. Worth investigating. Cautiously, perhaps. But not your primary focus. Continue mastering your coursework and establishing your public persona. Build alliances across houses. Knowledge flows through social connections as much as books. The mental connection began to weaken, the Echo's voice growing fainter. Long-distance communication drained Harry's magical energy quickly, especially without the sanctuary's amplifying effect. "We will speak again," the Echo promised as it faded. "Remember, knowledge is power, but secrets are weapons." With that cryptic remark, the connection dissolved. Harry opened his eyes, feeling drained but satisfied. The Echo, whatever its ultimate agenda, remained a valuable source of guidance about Hogwarts' hidden dimensions. He penned a brief letter to Ms. Nightshade, summarizing his first week and Snape's apparent hostility. After checking that the common room was quiet, he made his way to the Ollery to find Hedwig. The circular stone room at the top of the West Tower was drafty and malodorous from hundreds of owls, but Harry spotted Hedwig's snowy white feathers immediately among the school's tawny owls. She hooted softly and flew down to his shoulder, nipping his ear affectionately. "Hello, beautiful," he greeted her, stroking her feathers. "Feel up to a delivery? It's not too far." Hedwig gave him a look that clearly questioned his doubt about her abilities. Harry grinned and attached the letter to her leg. "It's for Ms. Nightshade at her shop in London. Wait for a reply if she has one." With a dignified hoot, Hedwig took off through one of the glassless windows, her white form soon disappearing against the night sky. Harry watched her go, then turned to leave, only to find himself face to face with a tall, imposing man in formal ministry robes. "Mr. Potter," the man said, his voice deep and measured. "Out rather late, aren't you?" Harry kept his expression neutral, quickly assessing the stranger. Mid-40s, expensive robes, confident posture suggesting authority, and a small silver insignia on his chest, a stylized M overlaid with a wand and what looked like a set of scales. "Curfew isn't for another hour, sir," Harry replied politely. "I was just sending a letter." "So I see." The man's eyes, a penetrating blue, studied Harry intently. "Allow me to introduce myself. Altus Blackwood, Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Regulatory Division." Harry felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Ollery's drafts. This was precisely the sort of ministry attention Slytherin's Echo had warned about, officials interested in the boy who lived, potentially monitoring his activities. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Blackwood," Harry said, keeping his tone casual. "Is the ministry visiting all first years, or am I special?" A thin smile crossed Blackwood's face. "Direct, aren't you?" "No, Mr. Potter, this isn't an official visit to you specifically. I'm at Hogwarts on other business, a routine review of the school's magical security measures." He paused. "Though I must admit, I was curious to meet you. Your arrival in the wizarding world has been rather quiet, despite your status." Harry shrugged slightly. "I didn't know I was famous until recently. I grew up with Muggle relatives who didn't tell me about magic." "Yes, I'm aware of your placement with the Dursley family." Something in Blackwood's tone suggested disapproval. "A most unusual arrangement, given your importance to our world." Harry's guard rose further. Why would a ministry official care about his living arrangements? And how much did he know about the Dursleys specifically? "It's worked out okay," Harry said vaguely. "Hogwarts is amazing, though. I'm learning a lot." "I'm sure you are." Blackwood's gaze remained uncomfortably focused. "Your professors speak highly of your performance so far. Professor Flitwick mentioned your particular aptitude for theory. Unusual for a student raised without magical knowledge." "I read a lot," Harry said, the same explanation he'd given his classmates. "Once I learned I was a wizard, I wanted to understand everything I could." "Admirable dedication." Blackwood glanced at the window where Hedwig had departed. "Corresponding with friends already? Or perhaps, a mentor?" The specific word choice, mentor, seemed too precise to be coincidental. Harry kept his expression open and slightly confused. "Just letting my friend know how school's going," he said. "She helped me shop for supplies in Diagon Alley." "I see." Blackwood stepped aside, clearing the path to the door. "Well, don't let me keep you from your evening activities, Mr. Potter. I'm sure we'll speak again during my time at Hogwarts." "Looking forward to it," Harry lied, edging past the man. "Good night, sir." "Good night, Mr. Potter. Do remember, magical regulatory officials like myself are always available if you encounter anything unusual. Even the smallest magical anomalies can be significant." With that cryptic remark, Blackwood turned to examine the owls, effectively dismissing Harry. As Harry descended the Ollery stairs, his mind raced. Blackwood's presence and interest couldn't be coincidental. Routine review of security measures sounded plausible, but his focused questions about Harry's background, education, and correspondence suggested a more specific agenda. Could the Ministry somehow have detected Harry's years of underage magic? The sanctuary was supposedly warded against such detection, but perhaps something had slipped through, or perhaps Harry's advanced performance in classes had triggered suspicion. Either way, Blackwood represented a new complication. Harry would need to be even more careful about revealing his abilities, and perhaps reconsider how openly he communicated with Ms. Nightshade. When Harry reached Ravenclaw Tower, he found the common room nearly empty except for a few older students studying quietly. He answered the Eagle Knocker's riddle, "What gets wetter as it dries?" A towel, and headed straight to his dormitory, mind still churning with concerns about Blackwood's appearance. The next morning, Harry joined Terry and Anthony for breakfast, where the main topic of conversation was the upcoming flying lesson scheduled for Thursday. "Nervous, Harry?" Terry asked, buttering his toast. "I heard you grew up with Muggles, so you've probably never been on a broom." "A bit," Harry admitted. "But I've read about flying techniques." Anthony rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Classic Ravenclaw response. "I've never done it, but I've read about it." Harry grinned, relaxing into the familiar banter. These normal student concerns, flying lessons, homework, house rivalries, provided a welcome distraction from his worries about Blackwood. His attention was drawn to the staff table, where Blackwood sat conversing with Professor Flitwick. The Ministry official seemed to be asking questions, with Flitwick responding animatedly. At one point, both men glanced in Harry's direction, quickly looking away when they noticed his attention. "Who's that talking to Professor Flitwick?" Anthony asked, following Harry's gaze. "Ministry official," Harry replied quietly. "I met him last night in the Ollery." "Altus Blackwood, from Magical Law Enforcement. Regulatory Division," Terry added, squinting at the insignia on Blackwood's robes. "My dad works at the Ministry. That division monitors unusual magical activity, enforces the statute of secrecy, that sort of thing." "Why would they send someone to Hogwarts?" Anthony wondered. Blackwood said something about reviewing security measures, Harry said, watching as the official now engaged Professor McGonagall in conversation. "Seemed pretty interested in how students were doing, though." "Probably just curious about you," Terry suggested. "You know, boy who lived and all that. Bet lots of Ministry people would love to chat with you." Harry nodded noncommittally, but he suspected there was more to it. Throughout the day, he noticed Blackwood's presence around the castle, observing classes from doorways, examining corridor junctions with what looked like magical measuring devices, and occasionally engaging students in casual conversation. By evening, Harry's concern had deepened enough that he decided to use Ms. Nightshade's communication stone. After ensuring privacy behind his bed curtains, he held the small polished stone in his palm and whispered, "Elara Nightshade," 3 times. The stone warmed slightly in his hand, then pulsed with a soft light. Harry waited, uncertain what would happen next. After about 10 minutes, Hedwig appeared at his dormitory window, tapping to be let in. Attached to her leg was a small scroll sealed with wax. H. Ministry interest unsurprising but concerning. B is specialized detector of unusual/ancient magic. Likely at Hogwarts due to sensitive object recently transferred there. Your magical signature might have registered during his preliminary scans. Be cautious but not paranoid. B operates legally but pushes boundaries. Avoid direct questions about your past education. If pressed, refer to self-study with standard texts only. Stone works as intended. For emergencies only going forward. Harry read the note twice, then held it to the small flame from his wand tip until it curled into ash. MS. Nightshade's warnings aligned with his own concerns. Blackwood wasn't just a random official, but a specialist in detecting unusual magic. If he'd performed scans of the castle, he might have detected something distinctive about Harry's magical signature, shaped by years of wandless practice and exposure to Slytherin's ancient knowledge. The reference to a sensitive object seemed to confirm the Echo's suggestion about the forbidden corridor. Something valuable had been brought to Hogwarts, something worth both protecting and monitoring. As Harry considered these developments, a soft tapping came at his bed curtain. "Harry? You awake?" It was Terry's voice. "Yeah, just finishing some reading," Harry replied, quickly extinguishing his wand light and opening the curtain slightly. Terry stood there in pajamas, looking excited. "Just heard from Penelope that Flitwick's starting a dueling club for interested students. All years, but first years need to demonstrate basic shield charms first. Thought you might want to sign up with me. A dueling club, organized combat magic training under proper supervision. Perfect cover for developing and demonstrating defensive abilities without raising suspicion." "Definitely," Harry agreed. "When do we sign up?" "Tomorrow after charms. Flitwick's posting the notice in the common room tonight." After Terry returned to his bed, Harry lay awake thinking. Blackwood's presence complicated his plans, but also provided useful information. If the Ministry was monitoring unusual magic at Hogwarts, Harry would need to be selective about which abilities he revealed and when. The dueling club offered an opportunity to showcase defensive skills legitimately, while the presence of a sensitive object in the forbidden corridor suggested there were larger events unfolding beyond Harry's personal situation. Sleep came slowly that night, his mind filling with questions. What was hidden in the third-floor corridor? Why was Snape so hostile? What exactly was Blackwood looking for? And how long could Harry maintain the delicate balance between his hidden knowledge and his public persona? As he finally drifted off, Harry resolved to accelerate his exploration of Hogwarts. If Slytherin had indeed created other hidden passages and chambers, they might provide secure spaces to practice and communicate with the Echo without risking detection. Knowledge was power, as Slytherin always reminded him, and right now, Harry needed every advantage he could find. The following weeks established a rhythm to Harry's life at Hogwarts. Weekdays were filled with classes, where he continued his strategy of demonstrated competence without exceptional brilliance. Evenings were divided between homework, casual socializing in the Ravenclaw common room, and careful exploration of the castle. This last activity proved the most rewarding. Using a combination of Parseltongue detection, whispering to suspicious-looking snake carvings, and magical sensitivity techniques learned from Slytherin, Harry discovered several hidden passages not mentioned in common knowledge about the school. Most were simply shortcuts between floors or wings, but one, located behind a serpentine pattern in the dungeon stonework, led to a small chamber that appeared to have been a personal study space. Dusty bookshelves lined one wall, and a writing desk faced a narrow, charmed window showing the lake depths despite being nowhere near an exterior wall. "Lumos Maxima," Harry whispered, brightening his wand light to examine the space more carefully. The chamber hadn't been used in centuries, judging by the dust, but it remained structurally intact. Most importantly, it didn't appear on any school maps and was accessible only via Parseltongue, making it an ideal private retreat. Harry spent several evenings cleaning the space and testing its magical properties. The walls were heavily warded against detection, and a simple tap of his wand activated privacy charms that would prevent eavesdropping. Perfect for practicing more advanced magic or communicating with Slytherin's Echo without risking discovery. He nicknamed it the Serpent Study, and began using it as a personal practice space, working on spells beyond the first-year curriculum during free periods. The privacy and security allowed him to push himself further than he could in the dormitory or common room. Meanwhile, Altus Blackwood's presence became a regular feature of castle life. The ministry official could be seen consulting with professors, examining architectural features with specialized instruments, and occasionally observing classes. He seemed particularly interested in defense against the dark arts lessons, often engaging Professor Quirrell in lengthy conversations that left the nervous teacher looking even more agitated than usual. Harry maintained a polite but distant relationship with Blackwood, greeting him when they passed in corridors but avoiding extended conversation. The official, for his part, watched Harry with obvious interest but made no further direct approaches after their Ollery encounter. The flying lessons, when they finally arrived, provided a welcome distraction. The Ravenclaws shared the session with Hufflepuffs on the castle grounds under Madame Hooch's watchful eye. Despite never having been on a broomstick before, Harry found the experience remarkably intuitive. "Up," he commanded, and the school broom jumped instantly into his hand while others struggled to get theirs to respond. Once airborne, Harry discovered a natural affinity for flying. The sensation of weightlessness, the precise control through subtle shifts of weight and direction, it all felt somehow familiar, as though his body remembered skills his mind had never learned. "Well done, Potter," Madame Hooch called as Harry executed a perfect hover turn. "Excellent control." By the end of the lesson, it was clear that Harry had an exceptional talent for flying. Several of his classmates suggested he try out for the Ravenclaw Quidditch team the following year, when first years became eligible. "You're a natural, Harry," Padma Patil told him as they walked back to the castle. "Were either of your parents Quidditch players?" "My dad was, I think," Harry replied, recalling a mention in one of Professor Flitwick's anecdotes. "A chaser for Gryffindor." "Must be in your blood then," Terry said, clapping him on the shoulder. "You should definitely try out next year." The flying success boosted Harry's confidence and provided a legitimate area where he could excel without raising suspicions. It also offered a connection to his father, a normal, healthy talent unrelated to his unusual magical education. Professor Flitwick's dueling club provided another welcome outlet. After demonstrating the basic shield charm required for first-year participation, Harry joined the twice-weekly sessions held in a specially warded classroom. "Dueling is not about flashy spells," Flitwick explained at the first meeting, standing on a raised platform so everyone could see him. "It's about precision, timing, and strategy. A well-placed simple spell will defeat a poorly executed complex one every time." The club was organized by skill level rather than year, with beginners practicing basic defensive positions and shields while more advanced students worked on counter-curses and offensive spells. Harry, despite being a first year, quickly progressed to an intermediate group after demonstrating exceptional shield charms and a solid grasp of basic counter-jinxes. "Excellent form, Mr. Potter," Flitwick squeaked after Harry successfully deflected 3 minor jinxes in succession from a practice dummy. "Your shield angles are precisely calculated for optimal deflection paths. 10 points to Ravenclaw for superior technique." What Flitwick didn't know was that Harry had been practicing these shields for years in Slytherin's sanctuary, refining the angles based on ancient magical geometry principles rarely taught in modern dueling. The dueling club had an unexpected benefit: it brought Harry into contact with students from other houses, expanding his social circle beyond Ravenclaw. He formed a casual friendship with Susan Bones, a Hufflepuff with an aunt in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and Neville Longbottom, the forgetful Gryffindor boy who struggled with confidence but showed surprising resilience. Most surprisingly, Harry found himself regularly paired with Daphne Greengrass, a reserved Slytherin girl who approached dueling with calculated precision rather than aggressive force. "Your shield is good, but your stance is too rigid," she told him after their third practice duel. "You need to be able to transition from defense to offense more fluidly." "Show me?" Harry asked, genuinely interested in her technique, which differed from the standard Hogwarts approach. Daphne demonstrated a subtle weight shift that allowed for quicker counterattacks without compromising defensive positioning. It was a sophisticated move for a first year, suggesting she'd had prior training. "Family tradition," she explained when Harry commented on this. "Greengrasses have always valued self-protection above offensive power. Not all Slytherins are about domination, despite what Malfoy might suggest." This insight into Slytherin House, so often painted with a single brush in school gossip, aligned with Harry's own suspicions that how stereotypes oversimplified complex realities. His friendship with Daphne developed cautiously. She was private by nature, seldom revealing personal information, but their shared interest in magical theory provided common ground. Unlike many of their peers, both understood that effective magic required more than memorizing incantations and wand movements. "It's about intent and understanding the underlying principles," Daphne said during one practice session. "My grandfather always said that knowing why a spell works is more important than knowing how to cast it." "Exactly," Harry agreed, pleased to find someone who shared this perspective. "If you understand the principles, you can adapt spells or even create new ones." Daphne gave him a considering look. "That's advanced thinking for a first year. Most students just want to know which spell does what." Harry shrugged, realizing he might have revealed too much of his theoretical knowledge. "I read ahead. Ravenclaw habit." If Daphne doubted this explanation, she didn't press the issue, another quality Harry appreciated about her. Unlike Hermione Granger, who bombarded him with questions whenever they crossed paths, or Draco Malfoy, who seemed determined to provoke reactions, Daphne respected boundaries. As October arrived, bringing cooler weather and the approach of Halloween, Harry continued balancing his various activities. Classes, dueling club, exploration, and maintenance of his social connections occupied most of his time, but he still made regular visits to the Serpent Study to practice advanced magic and occasionally communicate with Slytherin's Echo. These communications grew more challenging as the term progressed. The Echo seemed increasingly interested in Harry's observations about Hogwarts' current state, particularly regarding the restricted third-floor corridor and the professor's activities. "The Forbidden Corridor conceals something of great value," the Echo insisted during one mental connection. "Something Dumbledore fears might be targeted." "But targeted by whom?" Harry asked. "Voldemort's gone, isn't he?" "Gone is not dead," the Echo reminded him. "And there are other powers that might covet magical artifacts of significance." This cryptic response frustrated Harry, but he had learned that the Echo revealed information according to its own agenda, not Harry's questions. Instead, he focused on what he could observe directly. Through careful tracking of professors' movements and conversations overheard in corridors, Harry pieced together several key facts. The Forbidden Corridor contained something previously stored at Gringotts, its protection involved contributions from multiple professors, and Dumbledore himself had designed the final security measure. Blackwood's continued presence suggested Ministry interest in this object, whatever it was. The official could often be seen near the third-floor corridor, taking measurements with specialized instruments and consulting with Professor McGonagall about the castle's defensive wards. Harry's curiosity nearly got the better of him one evening in mid-October. After curfew, concealed by a disillusionment charm he'd mastered in the Serpent Study, he approached the Forbidden Corridor for a closer look. He had just reached the door when a soft voice spoke from the shadows. "Curiosity is an admirable trait, Mr. Potter, but sometimes dangerous." Harry froze, his charm still active but clearly ineffective against whoever had spoken. Slowly, he turned to see Professor Dumbledore standing calmly in an alcove, his half-moon spectacles gleaming in the torchlight. "How?" Harry began, then stopped, realizing the disillusionment was still in place. He cancelled the charm, appearing fully visible. "How did you know I was here, Professor?" "Hogwarts has many ways of alerting its headmaster to wandering students," Dumbledore replied mildly. "Particularly those approaching areas of special concern." Harry considered his options. Denial seemed pointless, while a full confession might reveal too much about his capabilities. "I was curious about what's so dangerous it deserves a death warning," he said finally, opting for a partial truth. Dumbledore's blue eyes twinkled. "A reasonable curiosity. However, the warning exists precisely because the danger is real, not metaphorical. Behind that door lies a series of protections guarding an object of significant value, an object best left undisturbed." "What kind of object?" Harry asked, unable to help himself. "One whose nature is not relevant to first-year studies," Dumbledore replied firmly but not unkindly. Now, I believe Ravenclaw Tower awaits your return. And perhaps in the future, curiosity might be satisfied through less nocturnal explorations. The gentle reprimand was clear, as was the fact that Dumbledore wasn't going to deduct points or assign detention. Harry nodded, recognizing the unexpected leniency. Yes, sir. Thank you. One moment, Harry, Dumbledore said as Harry turned to leave. That was a remarkably proficient disillusionment charm for a first-year student. Professor Flitwick mentioned your talent for charms, but that spell is typically taught in 6th year. Harry tensed slightly. I found it in a library book, sir. Theoretical concealments and practical applications. I've been practicing. Indeed. Dumbledore's expression remained genial, but his eyes seemed to sharpen. Self-study is a noble pursuit, especially in Ravenclaw. However, some magic is restricted to later years for good reason, safety concerns, primarily. I'll be more careful, sir, Harry promised, anxious to end the conversation before Dumbledore asked more specific questions. I'm sure you will. The headmaster gestured toward the main staircase. Good night, Harry. Good night, Professor. As Harry walked back to Ravenclaw Tower, he reviewed the encounter. Dumbledore had been surprisingly lenient about the curfew violation and attempted exploration of the Forbidden Corridor. However, his interest in Harry's advanced spell casting suggested he was keeping closer tabs on Harry's abilities than expected. The encounter reinforced the need for caution. If even a well-executed disillusionment charm couldn't evade Dumbledore's detection, Harry would need to be even more selective about when and where he demonstrated advanced magic. In the Ravenclaw common room, Harry found Terry Boot and Padma Patil working on astronomy charts by the fire. There you are, Terry said, looking up. We were wondering where you disappeared to after dinner. Library, Harry replied, the standard excuse for any unexplained absence. Lost track of time researching switching spells for transfiguration. McGonagall's essay isn't due until next week, Padma pointed out. You're getting as bad as Granger with the advance work. Harry shrugged, settling into an armchair beside them. Just trying to stay ahead. Speaking of which, did either of you understand the star chart for Jupiter's moons? I can't seem to get the orbital periods right. The conversation shifted to schoolwork, allowing Harry to mentally file away the evening's encounter with Dumbledore for later analysis. Whatever was hidden in the 3rd floor, it clearly warranted exceptional security, and had drawn the attention of both the headmaster and the ministry. The question remained, who would target such an object, and why? As Halloween approached, the castle's atmosphere shifted. Decorations appeared in the Great Hall, floating pumpkins, live bats, and orange streamers. The professors incorporated seasonal themes into their lessons, with Professor Flitwick teaching them to make objects fly, finally covering a charm Harry had mastered years earlier, and Professor McGonagall showing them how to transfigure pumpkins into lanterns. For Harry, the holiday carried a somber undertone. Halloween marked the anniversary of his parents' deaths, a fact he hadn't fully appreciated until arriving at Hogwarts, where other students occasionally mentioned it in hushed tones when they thought he couldn't hear. On the morning of October 31st, Harry woke feeling uncharacteristically melancholy. After a quiet breakfast, he slipped away to the Ollery to send a brief note to Ms. Nightshade, asking if she knew anything about his parents beyond the basic facts of their deaths. Classes proceeded normally throughout the day, though Harry found it difficult to concentrate. During charms, where they were practicing the levitation charm, he absently levitated his feather to the ceiling on his first attempt, earning surprised looks from his classmates and a delighted squeak from Professor Flitwick. Perfect execution, Mr. Potter. 10 points to Ravenclaw for flawless wand work and pronunciation. Harry quickly lowered the feather, realizing he performed the spell too perfectly for a first attempt. Just got lucky, I think, he said, deliberately messing up his next attempt to appear more normal. By dinner time, Harry's mood had improved slightly. The Great Hall looked spectacular, with thousands of bats swooping over the tables and massive carved pumpkins glowing with internal fires. The Halloween feast promised to be memorable, with dishes appearing that Harry had never seen before at Hogwarts. He had just helped himself to a baked potato when Professor Quirrell came sprinting into the hall, his turban askew and terror on his face. Everyone stared as he reached Professor Dumbledore's chair, slumped against the table, and gasped, "Troll, in the dungeons, thought you ought to know." Then he sank to the floor in a dead faint. The hall erupted into chaos until Professor Dumbledore shot purple firecrackers from his wand to restore silence. He ordered prefects to lead their houses back to dormitories while the teachers headed to the dungeons. As the Ravenclaw prefects gathered the younger students, Harry overheard Ron Weasley telling another Gryffindor, "Hermione doesn't know. She's been in the bathroom crying all afternoon after charms." Harry frowned. He hadn't spoken much with Hermione since the train ride, but he'd noticed her intelligence and dedication to learning, qualities he respected. The thought of her alone and unaware of the danger troubled him. "Terry," he said, grabbing his friend's arm. "I just remembered, Hermione Granger doesn't know about the troll. She wasn't at dinner." "So?" Terry replied, looking confused. "The Gryffindor prefects will check their bathrooms, won't they?" "Maybe, but what if they don't? Someone should warn her." Terry looked skeptical. "Are you volunteering? Because heading off alone with a troll loose seems like a really bad idea." He had a point, but Harry couldn't shake his concern. Making a split-second decision, he slipped away from the Ravenclaw line as they climbed the main staircase, ducking behind a suit of armor and applying a mild notice me not charm, not as powerful as a disillusionment, but enough to avoid casual observation. Harry made his way toward the girls' bathroom on the first floor, where he'd heard Hermione might be. The corridors were eerily quiet, the usual sounds of hundreds of students replaced by distant shouting from the direction of the dungeons. As he turned a corner, Harry came to an abrupt halt. A massive, 12-foot-tall mountain troll was shambling down the corridor ahead of him, dragging a huge wooden club. Its gray skin looked like granite, and its small head perched atop a boulder-like body seemed disproportionately small. "That's not in the dungeons," Harry muttered to himself, pressing against the wall. To his horror, the troll turned into a doorway, the very bathroom Harry had been heading for. A high, petrified scream echoed from the bathroom. Harry didn't stop to think. He sprinted forward, wand drawn, mind racing through the combat spells he'd learned from Slytherin's ancient texts. The standard first-year curriculum offered nothing effective against a fully grown mountain troll, their skin resisted most basic magic. Inside the bathroom, Hermione Granger was shrinking against the opposite wall, looking close to fainting. The troll was advancing on her, knocking sinks off the walls as it went. "Hermione, move!" Harry shouted, then switched to a more powerful voice. "Hey! Over here!" The troll stopped a few feet from Hermione, turning its tiny eyes toward Harry. It hesitated, then decided Harry was a more interesting target and lumbered toward him instead, raising its club. Harry knew he needed something powerful, something beyond what a first-year should know. But Hermione's life outweighed secrecy. "Contusio Maxima," he shouted, making a slashing movement with his wand. A bright blue bolt of energy shot from his wand, striking the troll's chest with a thunderclap sound. The concussive spell, designed specifically for creatures with magic-resistant hide, sent the troll staggering backward, crashing into the bathroom stalls. The troll roared in pain and anger, finding its feet faster than Harry expected. It swung its club in a wide arc that would have taken Harry's head off if he hadn't ducked. "Hermione, get to the door," Harry called, circling to keep the troll's attention. "Go get help." But Hermione seemed frozen in shock, staring at Harry with wide eyes. The troll advanced again, swinging its club down in a vertical smash. Harry rolled aside, the club splintering the tile floor where he'd stood. "Incarcerus titanium," Harry cast, aiming for the troll's legs. Thick, metallic ropes erupted from his wand, wrapping around the troll's ankles and binding them together. The creature swayed, off balance, then toppled forward with a crash that shook the entire bathroom. It wasn't defeated, however. Trolls possessed enormous strength, and already the metallic bindings were stretching as it struggled. "Hermione, please, run," Harry urged, preparing another spell. Instead of fleeing, Hermione finally snapped out of her shock and drew her own wand. "Wingardium Leviosa," she cried, aiming at the troll's dropped club. The massive wooden club rose into the air. Harry, immediately understanding her plan, added his own magic to strengthen the levitation. "Now!" he shouted, and together they released the spell. The club dropped directly onto the troll's head with a sickening crack. The creature went limp, unconscious or possibly dead. Harry approached cautiously, wand still raised. "Are you okay?" he asked Hermione, who was shaking violently. I think so," she stammered. "How did you, what were those spells?" "They're not in any of our textbooks." Before Harry could formulate a response, the bathroom door burst open. Professors McGonagall, Snape, and Quirrell rushed in, followed closely by Altus Blackwood. McGonagall's face paled at the sight of the troll. "What on earth were you thinking?" she demanded, cold fury in her voice. "You could have been killed. Why aren't you in your dormitory?" "It's my fault, Professor," Hermione said suddenly. "I went looking for the troll. I've read about them and thought I could handle it. If Harry hadn't found me, I'd be dead." Harry stared at her in surprise. Hermione Granger, telling a direct lie to a teacher. "That doesn't explain the spells used here," Blackwood interjected, examining the unconscious troll with professional interest. "These aren't first-year magics." All eyes turned to Harry, who thought quickly. "I've been reading ahead, sir. For the dueling club. Professor Flitwick encourages us to research defensive spells." Flitwick, who had just arrived, nodded vigorously. "Indeed, though I certainly never expected my students to test them on a mountain troll. Most impressive spell work, Mr. Potter, if highly irregular." Snape's dark eyes bored into Harry's, and he felt a subtle pressure against his mental shields, a light legitimacy probe. He reinforced his defenses while maintaining an outwardly innocent expression. 5 points from Gryffindor, Miss Granger, for serious lack of judgment, Professor McGonagall said. "As for you, Mr. Potter. 5 points to Ravenclaw for sheer dumb luck. Not many first-years could take on a full-grown mountain troll and live to tell the tale." Blackwood seemed less impressed. "I would be interested to know exactly which books you've been reading, Mr. Potter. Some of those spells are restricted to Auror training programs." "I don't remember the titles exactly," Harry said apologetically. "I was just looking for anything that might help in dueling practice." "We can discuss reading materials another time," Professor McGonagall interrupted. "Both of you should return to your dormitories immediately. The feast is being finished in the houses." As they left the bathroom, Harry noticed Snape's robes were torn and bloody near the right leg, which he was favoring slightly. The potions master quickly covered the injury when he saw Harry looking. Harry and Hermione walked in silence until they reached the point where they would separate, she toward Gryffindor Tower, he toward Ravenclaw. "Thank you," Hermione said quietly. "Those spells weren't from any extra reading, were they?" Harry hesitated. "Let's just say I take my studies very seriously." "So do I," she replied, a hint of determination in her voice. "Maybe we could study together sometime. I have questions about theoretical magic applications that no one else seems interested in." Despite the risk, Harry found himself nodding. Her quick thinking with the levitation charm had helped defeat the troll, and her lie to McGonagall had potentially saved him from more intense questioning. "I'd like that," he said. "Library, tomorrow afternoon." "Perfect." She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "And Harry? Your secret's safe with me. Whatever it is." As Harry continued to Ravenclaw Tower, he realized the troll incident had irrevocably altered his careful plans. He'd revealed advanced magical knowledge in front of multiple professors and a ministry official. Blackwood in particular would have questions. Yet he'd also gained something unexpected, an ally in Hermione Granger, whose intelligence and loyalty might prove invaluable in the challenges ahead. Sometimes, Harry reflected as he answered the Eagle Knocker's riddle, plans needed to adapt to circumstances. The path forward would require new strategies, new alliances, and perhaps a more selective approach to secrecy. After all, as Slytherin's echo often reminded him, true cunning wasn't about hiding everything, it was about controlling what others discovered, and when. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.